My wife, who just graduated from law school I paid for, publicly embarrassed me at her graduation party just because I asked to take a picture with her. She smirked and said, "I don't take pictures with our lives." A few minutes later, I placed a call to the law board committee, and the whole party came to a standstill. Look, I'm not going to sit here and pretend I'm some kind of victim, all right? My name's Marcus Hale, I'm 38 years old, and apparently my biggest crime in this life is believing that love and potential could coexist in the same zip code. Spoiler alert, they can't, and I've got the emotional scars and bank statements to prove it. When I met Claire Richardson 5 years ago, she was what you'd call financially challenged, which is just a fancy way of saying broke as hell. We're talking second-year law student living in a studio apartment that was literally smaller than most people's walk-in closets, surviving on a steady diet of instant ramen, questionable leftovers, and the kind of hope that only comes from someone who's never actually paid their own bills. You know the type. Big dreams, empty wallet, and a smile that could convince you to mortgage your future for their present. And me? Well, I was the guy everyone back home called boring but reliable. You know what that means in real-life translation? It means I was the sucker with a stable income and a savior complex the size of Texas. While all my buddies were out there living their best lives, traveling, partying, actually enjoying their 20s and early 30s, I was grinding like my life depended on it. And honestly, someone's life did depend on it, just not mine. I worked 3 jobs back then, and I'm not exaggerating for dramatic effect here. Monday through Friday, I was pulling double duty as an IT consultant for some corporate hellhole where everyone used Synergy, unironically, and thought casual Friday meant wearing jeans with your suit jacket. Nights and weekends? I was slinging drinks at this upscale cocktail bar downtown, listening to finance bros brag about their crypto portfolios while their dates pretended to be impressed. And then, just to really spice things up, I drove for Uber whenever I had a spare 4 hours, basically becoming a part-time therapist for drunk people and a mobile philosophical discussion leader for insomniacs who wanted to debate whether hot dogs were sandwiches at 2 in the morning. You might be wondering why anyone would voluntarily sign up for this kind of punishment. Well, here's the thing. I thought we were building something together. I genuinely believed that Claire and I were a team, that every tuition payment I made, every textbook I bought, every late-night study session I supported by bringing her coffee and encouragement was an investment in our future. Plural. Our future. 4 or 5 solid years. I was her personal ATM, life coach, and cheerleading squad all rolled into one exhausted package. I paid her tuition every semester. And let me tell you, law school isn't cheap. We're talking the kind of money that makes you wonder if they're printing the diplomas on actual gold leaf. I bought her books, those massive, unnecessary legal textbooks that cost more than my first car and somehow weigh approximately as much as a baby elephant. I even ironed her courtroom blazers. People, do you know how many blazers a law student needs? Too many. The answer is too many. Every time I felt that little voice in the back of my head asking if maybe, just maybe, I was being taken advantage of, Claire would look at me with those eyes and say something like, "Babe, we'll celebrate when I pass the bar. All of this is going to be worth it. You'll see. We're going to make it together." And like an idiot, a well-intentioned, hopelessly romantic idiot, I believed her. I believed every word. I thought I was building a partnership, a marriage, a life with someone who would eventually stand beside me as an equal. I pictured us 10 years down the line, sitting on our porch, laughing about the ramen days and the struggle and how we made it through together. I imagined her successful law career balanced perfectly with my tech business. Both of us finally comfortable, finally able to breathe without checking our bank accounts every 5 minutes. Turns out, I wasn't the partner in this equation. I was the investor. And not even the kind of investor who gets their name on the building or equity in the company. Nah, I was more like the silent partner who funds everything, takes all the risk, and gets absolutely nothing when the business goes public. I was the venture capitalist who got cut out of the deal right before the IPO. The angel investor who learned that angel was just code for sucker with cash. Claire used to tell her law school friends that she was self-made, which is technically true if you completely ignore the definition of self and made. She'd post those inspirational quotes on Instagram about strong women who did it all on their own, complete with candid study photos that I took in the apartment that I paid for, using the laptop that I bought. The cognitive dissonance was truly impressive. But here's what really gets me. I wasn't even asking for credit. I didn't need a parade or a medal or my name in her graduation program. I just wanted to be seen. I wanted to be acknowledged as something more than the boring, reliable guy who kept the lights on while she chased her dreams. I wanted her to look at me the way she looked at her future career, with excitement, with possibility, with the kind of respect you give to things that actually matter. She used to say, "We'll celebrate when I pass the bar, babe." And you know what? She was right. We did celebrate. Well, she celebrated. I just showed up, delivered some flowers, and learned what the view looks like from rock bottom. Because here's the punchline I didn't see coming. I didn't realize I'd be the joke at the celebration. I thought I was the supporting character who'd finally get their moment in the spotlight. Maybe a thank you speech or at least a genuine smile across a crowded room. Instead, I became the punchline in a story about a woman who made it despite her circumstances. And those circumstances had a name, a face, and 3 jobs that left him too tired to notice he was being written out of the narrative in real time. Looking back now, I can see all the signs I missed. The way she stopped asking about my day. The way we slowly became I in all her sentences. The way she'd correct people who assumed I was a lawyer too. Always making sure everyone knew I was just in tech, with that little dismissive laugh that made it sound like I spent my days playing video games instead of building actual software that actual companies actually used. But back then I was too busy being the dependable one, the reliable one, the boring one who showed up and did the work and loved someone who had already moved on without bothering to mention it. So yeah, that's me. Marcus Hale, 38 years old, believer in potential, investor in dreams, and the guy who learned the hard way that love and gratitude don't always come as a package deal. Some lessons cost you money. This one cost me 5 years and every ounce of self-respect I'd managed to save up. But don't worry, the story gets better, or worse, depending on whose side you're on. And something tells me you're not going to be on Claire's side for much longer. So here's where things get really fun. And by fun, I mean soul-crushingly humiliating in a way that'll probably require years of therapy to fully unpack. Claire's graduation party was scheduled for a Saturday night at this ridiculously fancy rooftop lounge downtown called The Elevation. Yeah, that was actually the name. The Elevation. Because nothing says, "I've made it," quite like a pretentious venue name that sounds like a motivational seminar. This place was the kind of spot where everything costs 3 times what it should and comes in portions small enough to fit on a coaster. We're talking string lights everywhere that probably cost more than my monthly rent, overpriced sushi that had been sitting under heat lamps just long enough to question its freshness, and a jazz band that seemed to think every musical mistake they made was actually an intentional artistic choice. You know the type. They'd hit a wrong note and then nod at each other like, yes, that dissonance really captures the existential dread of modern capitalism. The place was packed with Claire's law school crowd. And let me tell you, if you've never been surrounded by 100 newly minted lawyers who are all convinced they're the next Ruth Bader Ginsburg, you haven't truly experienced the full spectrum of human insufferability. Everyone was dressed to the nines, holding champagne flutes like they were props in a movie about successful people, talking way too loud about justice and ethics and how to bill clients for a 6-minute phone call without blinking. The energy in that room was equal parts celebration and Shark Tank, like everyone was simultaneously congratulating each other and sizing up the competition. I showed up wearing my best navy blazer, and okay, full disclosure, it was the same one from our wedding 4 years ago, but who's really counting? It still fit, it was still in decent shape, and honestly, when you've spent the last 5 years funneling every spare dollar into someone else's education, you don't exactly have a lot left over for updating your wardrobe. I'd even gotten it dry cleaned for the occasion, which felt like a big deal at the time. I wanted to look good. I wanted to look like I belonged there, standing next to my successful wife at her moment of triumph. In my hands, I carried a bouquet of stargazer lilies, Claire's favorite flowers, or at least they used to be back when she still told me personal things about herself. I'd special ordered them from this boutique florist across town, the kind of place where they wrap everything in that fancy paper and tie it with silk ribbons. Cost me $80, which probably sounds ridiculous for flowers that'll be dead in a week, but I wanted the gesture to be perfect. I wanted her to see me walk in with those lilies and remember that I knew her, that I paid attention, that I cared about the details. You'd think that kind of effort would earn me at least a smile, right? Maybe a kiss on the cheek? Thank you for coming, babe. Hell, at this point I would have settled for basic eye contact and a nod of acknowledgement. Wrong. So incredibly, painfully wrong. When I finally spotted Claire across the room, she was holding court at this big center table, surrounded by her law school friends like she was some kind of legal royalty. And maybe she was, in their world. She looked amazing, I'll give her that, wearing this gorgeous black cocktail dress that probably cost more than my car payment, hair done up in some complicated style that required a professional, makeup perfect. She was glowing with that particular kind of confidence that comes from finally achieving something you've worked your ass off for. Except, she didn't work her ass off alone, but apparently we were conveniently forgetting that part. Her crew was laughing at something she'd said, probably some inside joke about their contracts professor or a case study I wouldn't understand because I was just the IT guy who paid the bills. They all had that same energy, young, ambitious, ready to take on the world and bill it at $300 an hour. Every single one of them looked like they'd stepped out of a legal drama TV show, all sharp angles and sharper ambitions. I took a deep breath, straightened my blazer. The wedding blazer, the only good blazer I owned, and walked over with my bouquet of expensive lilies, feeling simultaneously proud of her and nervous about my place in this new world she'd entered. The closer I got, the more I could hear their conversation. Something about a firm downtown that was recruiting, starting salaries in the six figures, partnership tracks, corner offices. All the things that mattered to them. All the things that apparently mattered to Claire now. Hey, honey, I said, trying to sound casual and confident as I approached the table. My voice came out a little too loud, trying to be heard over the jazz band's enthusiastic butchering of Take 5. Can we take a picture together? You look amazing. It was such a simple request. Such a normal, reasonable thing to ask at your wife's graduation party. A picture. Evidence that we'd been there together, that this achievement belonged to both of us in some small way. Maybe something to post on social media, to show my mom, to frame on our wall alongside all the other milestone moments. Claire turned to look at me, and for just a second, I saw something flicker across her face. Annoyance, maybe? Embarrassment? It was gone so fast I almost thought I'd imagined it. Then she smirked, not smiled, smirked, in this way that made my stomach drop before my brain even processed what was about to happen. And then she said it, loud enough for the whole table to hear, loud enough that the conversations around us started to fade, loud enough that I'll probably hear it echoing in my nightmares for the rest of my natural life. I don't take pictures with low lives. The words just hung there in the air between us, like smoke from a gun that had just gone off. For a moment, time did that thing it does in movies where everything slows down and gets really quiet. The jazz band hit what I'm pretty sure was an actual wrong note this time, not an artistic one. The conversations at nearby tables stuttered and stopped. Someone, I think it was her friend Tara, the one who always looked at me like I was something stuck to the bottom of her designer's shoe, literally choked on a piece of shrimp tempura, coughing into her napkin while her eyes went wide. I just stood there, holding my $80 bouquet of stargazer lilies, wearing my wedding blazer, blinking like someone had just slapped me across the face with a law textbook. Did my wife, the woman I'd sacrificed everything for, the woman whose entire career I'd funded, just call me a lowlife? In front of all her friends? At her graduation party? The party I'd probably indirectly paid for through 5 years of tuition payments? Yeah, she did. The table had gone completely silent now. Everyone was looking at me, then at Claire, then back at me, like they were watching a tennis match but couldn't quite believe what they were seeing. A guy in a pinstripe suit, probably some trust fund kid who'd never worked a real job in his life, whispered "oof" under his breath. Someone else cleared their throat awkwardly. Tara had stopped choking and was now staring at her champagne glass like it held the secrets of the universe. And Claire? Claire just sat there with that smirk on her face, surrounded by her new friends in her new world, looking at me like I was an inconvenience she couldn't wait to get rid of. Like I was some random dude who'd wandered in off the street instead of the husband who'd made this entire moment possible. That's when I realized something important, something fundamental, something that would change everything that came next. I wasn't her partner. I wasn't even her past. I was her embarrassment, her secret shame, the part of her origin story she wanted to edit out before anyone important read it. Well, that was about to change. You know that moment in a sitcom where someone says something absolutely devastating and there's this uncomfortable pause before the laugh track kicks in? Yeah, this was that moment, except there was no laugh track, no commercial break to give everyone time to process, and absolutely no script telling me what my next line should be. This was real life, happening in real time, and I was standing there like an idiot with flowers that suddenly felt like they weighed about 700 pounds. The moment just hung there in the air between us, thick and awkward, like a bad Wi-Fi signal that keeps cutting out right when you're trying to stream something important. Everyone at that table was frozen, mid-sip, mid-bite, mid-breath. You could literally see people trying to figure out what the appropriate reaction was. Do we laugh? Do we pretend we didn't hear it? Do we check our phones and act like we're suddenly very interested in an urgent email? The social anxiety in the air was so thick you could have cut it with one of those overpriced sushi knives. Tara, Claire's best friend, the one who'd been choking on shrimp tempura like karma was trying to send her a message, let out this weird little giggle into her champagne glass. You know the kind, that nervous laugh people do when they're not sure if something's supposed to be funny but they want to be on the winning team anyway? It came out all bubbly and uncertain, like even she wasn't committed to it. The dude in the pinstripe suit, Mr. Oof, himself, leaned over to the guy next to him and whispered something while trying really hard not to look at me. Even the jazz band, God bless them, hit another legitimately wrong note, like the universe itself was cringing so hard it affected their ability to play instruments. I just stood there for what felt like 17 years, but was probably only about 5 seconds, still holding those damn lilies, still wearing my wedding blazer, still trying to process the fact that my wife had just called me a lowlife in front of her entire graduating class. My brain was doing that thing where it runs through about 50 different response options in rapid succession. Walk away, cry, throw the flowers, make a scene, pretend I didn't hear it, laugh it off, set something on fire, and then something weird happened, something I didn't expect. I smiled. Not because it was funny. Oh hell no, nothing about this was funny. Not because I was okay with what just happened, because I definitely wasn't. I smiled because when life hands you humiliation on a silver platter at a rooftop party full of lawyers who think they're hot shit, you might as well order dessert and make everyone else uncomfortable too. When you're already at rock bottom, you've got nothing left to lose, and that's a surprisingly liberating feeling. So I smiled. A real smile. The kind of smile that probably looked a little unhinged if I'm being honest, like I'd just figured out the punchline to a joke that nobody else had heard yet. Lowlife, I said, nodding slowly like I was really considering the accusation, rolling it around in my head to see if it fit. My voice came out surprisingly steady, surprisingly calm, which seemed to throw Claire off because her smirk faltered just a little bit. You're right, sweetheart. You're absolutely right. I mean, I only paid for your degree, your rent, your car, your bar prep course, and those emotional therapy sessions you needed after finals when you had that breakdown about contracts too. So yeah, technically, I'm pretty broke now. Guilty as charged. The table went dead silent. Like, morgue silent. Library silent. Holding your breath underwater silent. Someone's fork clattered against their plate, and it sounded like a gunshot in the sudden quiet. Tara's giggle died in her throat, so fast I'm pretty sure she choked on it a little. Pinstripe suit guy's eyes went wide, and he suddenly found his sushi extremely interesting, staring at it like it might tell him how to escape this situation. A few people at the surrounding tables, people who'd been eavesdropping because let's be real, everyone was eavesdropping, let out these nervous laughs. The awkward kind. The kind where you're not sure if you're laughing at the joke or at the absolute carnage unfolding in front of you. It was the social equivalent of watching a car crash in slow motion. You know you shouldn't look, but you absolutely cannot look away. Claire's face did this interesting thing where it went from smug to surprised to angry in about 2 seconds flat. Her jaw tightened, and I could see her doing that thing she always did when she was pissed. This little muscle in her cheek would twitch. She set down her champagne glass with just a little too much force, and some of it sloshed over the rim onto the white tablecloth. "Marcus," she said, and her voice had that warning tone that I'd heard 1,000 times before. That tone that said I was about to cross a line, that I needed to back down, that I was embarrassing her. "Don't make a scene. Don't make a scene. That's rich. That's absolutely beautiful. She calls me a lowlife in front of 50 people, humiliates me at her graduation party that I essentially funded, and I'm the one making a scene? The audacity was truly impressive. If they gave out degrees in gaslighting, Claire would have graduated summa cum laude. I laughed. I actually laughed, and it came out sounding maybe a little bit crazy, but you know what? I'd earned a little bit of crazy. I'd paid for it, literally, over 5 years of sacrifice. Make a scene, I repeated, still smiling that smile that probably looked like it belonged on someone who'd just snapped. Honey, I'm not making a scene. I am the scene. I'm the whole damn production. I'm the opening act, the main event, and the encore. Hell, I sold the tickets and ran the concession stand. A couple of people actually snorted into their drinks at that one. I saw a guy at the next table over. Some older dude who was probably a professor, crack a smile and try to hide it behind his hand. Even one of the jazz band members, the guy on the saxophone, looked over and raised his eyebrows like he was impressed. Claire stood up so fast her chair scraped against the floor with this horrible screeching sound that made everyone wince. She grabbed my arm, not gently, and tried to pull me away from the table, away from her friends, away from the audience she'd just performed for. Can we talk? She hissed through clenched teeth, still trying to smile for her friends like everything was fine. Like this was just a little misunderstanding between a happy couple. Privately, I looked down at her hand on my arm, then at her face, then at all the people watching us. Every single person at that table was pretending not to stare while absolutely staring. Tara had her phone out now, probably texting the group chat. Pinstripe Suit was whispering to his buddy again. A girl I didn't recognize had her mouth literally hanging open. Sure, I said pleasantly. Let's talk. But first, let me get this straight. You don't want to take a picture with me because I'm a lowlife, but you do want to talk to me privately? Interesting choice. Very lawyer of you. Only acknowledge the help when nobody's watching, right? Her grip on my arm tightened, and I could see her doing that thing where she was counting to 10 in her head, trying not to lose her cool in front of everyone who mattered to her new career. Because that's what this was really about, wasn't it? Image. Optics. Making sure everyone at this party saw her as the self-made success story, not the woman whose husband worked 3 jobs to put her through school. You're being ridiculous, she said quietly, but loud enough that the people closest to us could still hear. You're embarrassing yourself. And that's when it hit me. The real punchline. The thing that made all of this suddenly crystal clear. She genuinely believed that. She actually, honestly thought that I was the one who should be embarrassed. That calling out her behavior, naming the reality of our situation, pointing out the 5 years of sacrifice I'd made, that was somehow more shameful than what she'd just done. The cognitive dissonance was absolutely stunning. It was like watching someone set a house on fire and then blame the smoke alarm for making too much noise. I gently pulled my arm out of her grip and took a step back. The lilies were still in my other hand, and I looked at them for a second. $80, special ordered, her favorite flowers. What a waste. You know what? I said, and my voice came out tired suddenly. Not angry, not hurt, just exhausted. You're right. I am making a scene, and it's been a long time coming. I set the flowers down on her table, right in the middle of all the champagne glasses and expensive sushi. They looked ridiculous there, too pretty for the moment, too sincere for the company. Enjoy your party, I said. Enjoy your new life. Enjoy everything you worked so hard for. The sarcasm in that last sentence could have cut glass. And then I did something I should have done a long time ago. I turned around and walked toward the bar, leaving her standing there with her mouth open and her friends suddenly very interested in their phones. As I walked away from that table, from Claire, from her smirking friends, from the whole toxic circus, the memories started flooding back. You know how they say your life flashes before your eyes when you're dying? Well, apparently the same thing happens when your marriage dies, except it's slower and way more painful, and there's a jazz band providing an unnecessarily dramatic soundtrack. I could see it all now, crystal clear, like someone had finally turned on the lights in a room I'd been stumbling through in the dark for 5 years. Every red flag I'd ignored, every warning sign I'd convinced myself was just a misunderstanding, every moment where my gut told me something was off, and I'd told my gut to shut up, because love conquers all, right? Wrong. So spectacularly, devastatingly wrong. I remembered the first time one of my buddies tried to warn me. It was about 6 months after Claire and I had gotten serious, maybe a year before we got married. My friend Jake and I were grabbing beers at our usual spot, this dive bar near my apartment that served wings so good they could make you forget your problems for at least 20 minutes. I'd been going on and on about Claire, how smart she was, how driven, how she was going to be this amazing lawyer someday, and we were going to have this incredible life together. Jake had listened patiently, nodding and making the appropriate supportive sounds, until he finally put his beer down and looked at me with this expression that I now recognize as concern mixed with my friend is about to make a huge mistake, and I have to at least try to stop him. Bro, he'd said, choosing his words carefully. I'm happy you're happy. Really I am. But doesn't it bother you that you're paying for everything? Like everything? Her rent, her tuition, her groceries, her car insurance. I mean, when does she start contributing? I'd bristled immediately, gotten defensive the way you do when someone points out a truth you're not ready to hear. She's in law school, man. She's focused on studying. She doesn't have time for a job. This is temporary. Once she graduates, once she passes the bar, things will balance out. We're investing in our future. Jake had given me this look, this sad, knowing look that said he'd heard this story before and knew exactly how it ended. Your future, or her future? Same thing, I'd said confidently, like I actually believed it. We're a team. He'd opened his mouth to say something else, then closed it, shaken his head. Taken another drink. All right, man. I hope you're right. I really do. But he wasn't the only one. Oh no. I had a whole chorus of people trying to tell me the truth that I was too stubborn, or too in love, or too stupid to see. My sister Rachel had pulled me aside at Thanksgiving during Claire's second year of law school. We'd been in the kitchen, me washing dishes while everyone else watched football in the living room, and Rachel had been drying plates with this concerned expression that made her look way too much like our mom. Marcus, she'd said quietly, glancing toward the living room where Claire was chatting with our cousins. Can I ask you something? And please don't get mad. Sure, I'd said, scrubbing at a particularly stubborn piece of cranberry sauce. Are you happy? Like really happy? The question had caught me off guard. Of course I'm happy. Why would you ask that? Rachel had set down the plate she was drying and turned to face me directly. Because you look exhausted. Because you're working yourself to death. Because every time we talk, you're stressed about money or tired from pulling double shifts. And meanwhile, Claire is. I don't know. She just seems like she's living her best life while you're drowning. She's in law school, I'd said, and I realized I was using the same defensive tone I'd used with Jake. It's hard. She's under a lot of pressure. And you're not. Rachel had challenged. Marcus, you're working 3 jobs. 3. When was the last time you did something for yourself? When was the last time she did something for you? I'd thought about it, standing there with my hands in dishwater, and couldn't come up with a good answer. We're building something together, I'd finally said, knowing it sounded weak even as I said it. Rachel had sighed. Okay, but just promise me you'll think about whether she's actually building it with you, or if she's just letting you build it for her while she takes all the credit. I'd promised, but I hadn't thought about it. Not really. Because thinking about it would have meant admitting that maybe, just maybe, everyone who loved me could see something I couldn't. Then there was my coworker Lisa from the IT firm, who'd been the most blunt about it. We'd been grabbing lunch one day, sitting in the break room eating sad desk salads, and I'd mentioned something about picking up an extra Uber shift that weekend to cover Claire's bar prep course fees. Lisa had put down her fork and looked at me like I'd just told her I was planning to swim with sharks while covered in bacon. Dude, stop. Stop what? Stop funding this woman's entire existence. She's using you. Like, textbook using you. You know that, right? I'd laughed it off. Actually laughed. She's not using me. We're married. That's what you do. You support each other. Except she's not supporting you, Lisa had pointed out. When was the last time she paid for anything? When was the last time she worked? When was the last time she even acknowledged everything you're doing? She says thank you. I'd protested weakly. Saying thank you and actually being grateful are 2 very different things, Lisa had said. Mark my words, the second she doesn't need you anymore, she's gone. I've seen this before. Hell, my ex-husband did the same thing to me. Used me to get through medical school and then dumped me for a nurse the month after he started his residency. Claire's not like that, I'd insisted. Lisa had just shrugged. I hope you're right. But maybe keep some screenshots of all those tuition payments, just in case. At the time, I thought she was being cynical. Bitter. projecting her own failed marriage onto my perfectly fine one. Now I wished I'd listened. Now I wished I'd kept better records, taken her advice, protected myself. But the worst memory, the one that really stung as I stood there at the bar ordering my drink, was from about 6 months ago. Claire had just finished her final exams, was waiting for bar results, and I'd suggested we take a weekend trip. Nothing fancy, just a little bed and breakfast upstate, a chance to relax together and celebrate her being done with school. She'd looked at me like I'd suggested we vacation in a dumpster. "I can't afford that right now, Marcus." "I'll pay for it," I'd said, because of course I would. I always did. "That's not the point," she'd snapped. "I need to focus on networking, on making connections for jobs. I don't have time for some romantic getaway." "We haven't had a real vacation in 5 years," I'd pointed out. "Don't you think we've earned it? Don't you think we deserve a break?" "You mean I've earned it," she'd corrected. "I'm the one who just finished law school. You've just been working. Just been working. Like those 3 jobs were nothing. Like every sacrifice I'd made was just background noise in her success story." I let it go. Convinced myself she was stressed, that she didn't mean it the way it sounded. Told myself that once things settled down, once she had a job and felt more secure, she'd go back to being the woman I'd fallen in love with. But here's the thing about rose-colored glasses. When you're wearing them, all the red flags just look like flags. As the laughter from that table behind me faded into the general party noise, as I leaned against the bar and waited for the bartender to notice me, I finally let myself see it all clearly. Every warning I'd ignored, every excuse I'd made for her, every time I'd chosen to believe her promises over the evidence right in front of my face. My friends had warned me, "Bro, she's using you." And I'd said, "Nah, she's just ambitious." My sister had warned me, "She's not building anything with you." And I'd said, "You don't understand our relationship." My coworker had warned me, "The second she doesn't need you, she's gone." And I'd said, "Claire's not like that." Turns out ambition looks a lot like betrayal when you're wearing a cap and gown and surrounded by people who don't know what you sacrificed to get there. Turns out, using someone and building a partnership can look identical until the person getting used finally opens their eyes. Turns out everyone else could see what I couldn't, or wouldn't. I'd studied patience while Claire studied law. 5 years of advanced coursework in biting my tongue, swallowing my pride, and convincing myself that love meant putting someone else's dreams ahead of my own happiness. And you know what? I got my PhD in it. Graduated top of my class in the school of being a doormat. The bartender finally made his way over, and I must have looked like hell because he took one look at my face and said, "Rough night?" "You could say that," I replied. My wife just called me a lowlife at her graduation party. The party I basically paid for. He winced. "Ouch. What are you drinking?" "Something strong enough to make me forget the last 5 years, but not so strong I can't enjoy what's about to happen next." He raised an eyebrow but didn't ask. "Smart man. One old-fashioned, coming up." "Make it heavy on the irony," I said. So instead of doing what any normal person would do, which would be storming out, making a scene, maybe throwing a drink, definitely crying in my car, I did something that probably looked insane to anyone watching. I stayed. I ordered a drink. I leaned against that bar like I had all the time in the world and nothing better to do than enjoy the ambience of my own public humiliation. One old-fashioned, I told the bartender, and I swear to God, this came out of my mouth without even thinking, heavy on the irony. He gave me this look, half sympathy, half amusement, and started mixing the drink. I could feel eyes on me from all over the room. The story was already spreading through the party like wildfire. "That guy over there? Yeah, that's Claire's husband. She just called him a lowlife. Can you believe it? Did you hear what he said back? This is better than the drama on Suits." From my vantage point at the bar, I had a perfect view of Claire's table. She'd sat back down, and her friends had immediately swarmed her with that particular brand of fake concern that women deploy when they smell gossip. Tara was leaning in close, probably asking if she was okay, while simultaneously filing away every detail to share with the group chat later. Pinstripe suit guy had his arm around some blonde woman, both of them shooting glances in my direction and whispering. A couple of the older professors had wandered off, probably uncomfortable with the amount of personal drama unfolding at what was supposed to be a professional celebration. But Claire? Oh, Claire was in her element now. She was doing damage control, working the table like a politician after a scandal. I could see her laughing, touching people's arms, leaning in to say things that made them laugh and nod. She was spinning the narrative in real time, probably painting me as the crazy, jealous husband who couldn't handle her success. The bitter spouse who showed up to ruin her big moment. Poor Claire, stuck with such an unsupportive partner. Thank God she's finally free to thrive without dead weight holding her back. And you know what? A month ago, hell, maybe even an hour ago, that would have worked. I would have felt guilty. I would have wondered if maybe I was being unreasonable, if maybe I was letting my insecurities get the best of me, if maybe I should apologize for embarrassing her at her own party. But right now, watching her perform for her audience, I felt nothing but clarity. Crystal clear, high definition, 4K clarity. The bartender slid my drink across the bar. On the house, he said quietly. I heard what happened. You okay, man? Getting there, I said, taking a sip. It was perfect, smooth, strong, with just enough sweetness to take the edge off. Thanks. He nodded and moved down the bar to help another customer, leaving me alone with my thoughts and my drink and the beginnings of a plan that was forming in my head like a storm cloud gathering on the horizon. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out and saw a text from my buddy Chris, who I'd mentioned the party to earlier in the week. He probably expected me to be sending him happy photos of my successful wife, maybe a selfie of us together looking like a power couple. The text read, "Heard she called you a lowlife. You okay, man?" I stared at that message for a second. Word traveled fast. Someone must have already texted him, or maybe posted about it on social media. Great. Just great. My humiliation was probably already going viral in our friend circle. I typed back, "Give me 10 minutes. Gonna redefine the word low." His response was immediate. "What are you gonna do?" I looked at that question for a long moment, my finger hovering over the keyboard. What was I going to do? Walk away? Let her win? Let her tell everyone that I was just the bitter ex-husband who couldn't handle her success? Let her rewrite our entire history, erasing 5 years of sacrifice and support so she could be the self-made success story she'd always wanted to be? No. Hell no. I didn't type anything back to Chris. Instead, I took another sip of my old-fashioned and let my mind work through the situation with the kind of cold, calculated precision I usually reserved for debugging code or solving complex IT problems. Here's the thing that nobody at that rooftop party knew. The thing that Claire had conveniently forgotten in her rush to distance herself from her low-life husband. I wasn't just some random IT guy who fixed computers and drove for Uber. That was the side hustle, the survival job, the thing I did to pay the bills while Claire chased her dreams. My actual career, the thing I'd built before I met Claire and had put on hold to support her. I owned a tech company. Small, yeah, but specialized and very, very good at what we did. We built digital compliance software, the kind of behind-the-scenes systems that nobody thinks about until they need them. Boring stuff. Databases, security protocols, verification systems. The kind of technology that major institutions relied on to keep their operations running smoothly and legally. And one of our biggest clients? The State Law Board Committee. You know, the organization responsible for licensing lawyers. The people who decided whether someone could practice law or not. The gatekeepers of the entire legal profession in this state. We'd landed that contract about 2 years ago, right around the time Claire was in her second year of law school. I'd actually told her about it, excited about the big client, about how it might mean more stable income, about how things were looking up for my company. She'd barely listened, too focused on studying for her civil procedure exam. Ironic, considering civil procedure was all about following the rules, and she was about to learn a very hard lesson about what happens when you don't. My company handled their database. We managed their applicant tracking system. We maintained their digital records. We built the software that verified financial disclosures, checked for conflicts of interest, and flagged any inconsistencies in applications. And I had access to all of it. Not illegal access. This wasn't some hacking situation. I had legitimate, authorized, administrative access as the owner of the company that maintained their systems. I could look up any applicant, review any file, check any detail. It was part of my job to ensure data integrity, to catch errors, to make sure everything was running smoothly. I pulled out my phone again and opened my email app, scrolling through until I found the folder labeled State Bar Admin. There it was, my login credentials for the administrative portal. I checked the system just last week, running a routine security audit. My fingers hovered over the screen. This was the moment. The fork in the road. I could finish my drink, walk out of this party, file for divorce, and move on with my life. Take the high road. Be the bigger person. Let karma handle Claire in its own time. Or I could take that low road. The one Claire had just accused me of being on anyway. If I was already a lowlife in her eyes, in front of all her friends and colleagues, then what exactly did I have to lose? I thought about 5 years of sacrifice. 5 years of 3 jobs. 5 years of instant ramen while she ate sushi. 5 years of ironing her blazers and proofreading her papers and listening to her complain about professors and classmates and the stress of it all. 5 years of just wait until I graduate, and we'll celebrate later, and you're so supportive, babe. 5 years of being a doormat with a credit card and a stupid, stubborn belief in potential. My phone buzzed again. Another text from Chris. Dude, whatever you're planning, just think it through first. I smiled. Good old Chris. Always the voice of reason. Always the guy who told you to sleep on it, to cool down, to not make any rash decisions you'd regret. But here's the thing about regret. I'd spent 5 years regretting things I didn't do. Regretting that I didn't stand up for myself more. Regretting that I didn't push back when Claire started treating me like an ATM instead of a partner. Regretting that I didn't listen to Jake, to Rachel, to Lisa, to everyone who tried to warn me. I was done with that kind of regret. I pulled up my contacts and scrolled down to a number I hadn't called in a while. It was labeled Board Executive Line, a direct connection to the administrative office that handled bar applications and licensing issues. I'd gotten the number when we first set up their system, told to call if there were ever any technical emergencies or data integrity concerns. Well, this was definitely a data integrity concern. I looked back over at Claire's table one more time. She was posing for photos now, smiling that brilliant smile, holding her diploma, surrounded by congratulatory people who thought they were witnessing the beginning of a great legal career. The jazz band had started playing something upbeat. I think it was Feeling Good. How appropriate. I hit the call button. The phone rang once, twice. On the third ring, someone picked up. State Bar Administration, this is Director Morrison. Evening, Director. I said, my voice completely calm, completely professional. This is Marcus Hale from Hale Tech Solutions. I'm calling about a discrepancy I've noticed in one of your new applicant profiles. I think we need to flag it for review. At this hour? He sounded surprised, but not annoyed. We had a good working relationship. My company had saved their asses more than once with our reliable systems. I know, I apologize for the timing, I said. But given the sensitivity of bar admissions, I thought it was better to report it immediately rather than wait until Monday. I appreciate that. What's the issue? I took a sip of my drink. The irony tasted delicious. It's regarding applicant Claire Richardson. ID number 4276B. There's a conflict of interest issue with her financial declaration. The system flagged some inconsistencies regarding undisclosed support payments during her academic term. There was a pause. I could hear keyboard clicking on the other end. I'm pulling up her file now, Morrison said. What kind of support payments? Substantial ones, I said. Tuition, housing, living expenses. All provided by a spouse, but not properly disclosed in the financial aid sections or the character and fitness portions of her application. It raises questions about financial transparency and full disclosure, which, as you know, are pretty crucial for bar admission. More keyboard clicking. A longer pause. Mr. Hale, Morrison said slowly, are you saying there's evidence of misrepresentation on this application? I'm saying there's a discrepancy that needs investigation, I replied. That's all. I'm just the tech guy flagging what the system caught. What you do with that information is entirely up to your office. We'll need to put her admission on hold pending review, he said. This is serious. We'll have to contact her immediately. I checked my watch. How immediately are we talking? Within the hour. We take these matters very seriously. Of course, I said. That's why I called. Just doing my job, making sure everything's above board. We appreciate the vigilance, Morrison said. I'll escalate this to the review committee tonight. Happy to help, I said, and ended the call. I set my phone down on the bar and picked up my drink. The jazz band was still playing Feeling Good, and honestly, I was starting to feel pretty good myself. I stepped outside onto the rooftop terrace after making that call, needing some air and also wanting to position myself where I could watch the entrance. The night air was cool against my face, a welcome relief from the stuffy atmosphere inside, where everybody was too busy networking and social climbing to notice they were suffocating. The city lights flickered below us like they were in on the joke, like they knew something spectacular was about to go down and they had front row seats. I leaned against the railing, phone still in my hand, and let myself have a moment. Just a moment to process what I'd just done. There was no going back now. I'd pulled the trigger, made the call, set things in motion that couldn't be undone. In about 30 minutes, maybe less, someone from the State Bar was going to walk through those doors and Claire's entire world was going to implode. Part of me, the part that had loved her once, that had believed in us, that had spent 5 years trying to build something, felt a twinge of guilt. Just a twinge. Like a phantom pain from something that used to be there, but wasn't anymore. The rest of me? The rest of me felt like I'd just exhaled after holding my breath for 5 years straight. My phone buzzed. Chris again. You're being really quiet, and that's making me nervous. I typed back, just enjoying the view. Party's about to get interesting. Marcus, what did you do? Nothing illegal. Nothing immoral. Just made sure the right people knew the truth. Oh shit. Yeah. I pocketed my phone and checked my watch. 23 minutes since I'd made the call. Morrison had said within the hour, but knowing how seriously the bar took integrity violations, I figured they'd move fast. Especially on a Saturday night when they could catch the person at their graduation party, surrounded by witnesses. Maximum impact, maximum accountability. The irony wasn't lost on me that Claire had studied law for 5 years and somehow missed the part about full disclosure being kind of a big deal. Through the glass doors, I could see the party continuing inside. The jazz band had moved on from Feeling Good. Shame, I was really vibing with that one. And we're now playing something smooth and forgettable. Claire was still holding court at her table, probably 3 glasses of champagne deep by now, laughing with her law school friends about whatever lawyers in training laugh about. Billable hours? Loopholes? The crushing weight of student debt they didn't actually have to pay themselves? Tara was practically glued to her side, playing the role of best friend and social media manager, taking photos for Instagram that would probably be captioned something like, "She did it." So proud of this queen. Hashtag law school grad, hashtag future esquire, hashtag self-made. That last hashtag was going to age like milk in the sun. I saw a movement at the entrance. The kind of movement that makes everyone's heads turn instinctively. A man in a gray suit had walked in, and he had that unmistakable air of authority that comes from years of bureaucratic power. He wasn't dressed for a party. He was dressed for business. Serious business. He stopped at the host's stand, flashed some kind of credentials to the hostess, and said something that made her eyes go wide. She pointed toward Claire's table. Oh, this was happening. This was really happening. I walked back inside casually, drink in hand, positioning myself at the bar where I had a perfect view, but wasn't obviously watching. The bartender caught my eye and raised an eyebrow. I gave him a small nod that said, "Watch this." The man in the gray suit made his way through the crowd with purpose. People stepped aside for him automatically, the way you do when someone's body language screams, "Official business, move." The jazz band hit a particularly awkward note. I was starting to think they were psychically connected to the drama in the room, and a few people near Claire's table noticed the approaching figure. Conversations started to die down. That thing happened where the silence spreads through a room like ripples on water. First, the tables closest to the entrance went quiet, then the next ring of tables, then the one after that, until finally the vacuum of sound reached Claire's table. She was mid-laugh when she noticed everyone staring at something behind her. She turned around, still smiling, probably expecting another well-wisher or maybe a professor coming to offer congratulations. Instead, she found herself face-to-face with a man holding official-looking credentials and an expression that could have frozen hell over. "Excuse me," he said, his voice carrying across the now silent room because apparently God wanted to make sure everyone heard this. "Are you Claire Richardson?" Claire's smile faltered but didn't quite die. "Yes? Can I help you?" The jazz band had stopped playing entirely now. Even they knew this was a moment that required complete silence. The man reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a document. Not a warrant or anything that dramatic, but an official letter with the State Bar letterhead visible even from where I was standing. "Ms. Richardson, I'm Deputy Director James Morrison from the State Bar Administration. I need to speak with you regarding your bar admission application." You could have heard a champagne bubble pop in that silence. Claire's face went from confused to concerned in about half a second. What? My application was approved. I got my admission letter 3 days ago. Yes, Morrison said, his tone completely professional, completely neutral, completely devastating. However, we've received information that requires immediate review. Your bar admission has been placed on administrative hold, effective immediately, pending investigation. The word immediately seemed to echo in the silent room, even though he'd only said it once. I watched Claire's face drain of color faster than my bank account had drained over the past 5 years. It was fascinating, really, watching someone process the worst news of their life in real time while surrounded by everyone they wanted to impress. Her mouth opened, closed, opened again like a fish trying to understand why the water had suddenly disappeared. What? The word came out strangled, barely audible. What do you mean? I don't understand. Morrison held out the document. Claire took it with shaking hands, and I saw Tara lean in to read over her shoulder, along with half the people at the table. Everyone else in the room was craning their necks, trying to figure out what was happening. Your financial disclosures are under review, Morrison continued, and I had to hand it to him. He maintained perfect professional composure while dropping a bomb that was nuking this woman's entire career before it started. The board has received information regarding undisclosed support payments during your academic term. Specifically, substantial financial support from your spouse that wasn't properly disclosed in your application. Every head in that room turned toward me simultaneously. It was like a choreographed dance move, this unified swivel of about 50 people all looking at the guy leaning against the bar with an old-fashioned in his hand. Claire's eyes found mine across the room, and I saw the exact moment she realized what had happened. The exact moment she understood who had made that call, who had provided that information, who had just systematically dismantled everything she'd worked for. Well, everything we'd worked for. But semantics. I raised my glass to her. Just a small gesture. A little salute. The kind of thing you do when you want to say cheers without actually saying anything at all. Her face transformed from shock to pure fury so fast, it was almost impressive. You, she hissed, loud enough for everyone to hear. You didn't. Oh, I did. I said cheerfully, projecting my voice across the room, because if we were doing this, we were doing it right. Guess the lowlife finally took a picture. Just not the one you expected. More of a screenshot, really, of 5 years of financial records. Someone gasped. I think it was Tara, but it could have been any of the dozen people whose mouths were hanging open. Morrison cleared his throat, reclaiming control of the situation. Ms. Richardson, I understand this is difficult timing, but the board takes disclosure violations very seriously. Failing to properly report financial support during your academic term raises significant concerns about character and fitness, which, as you know, are essential requirements for bar admission. This is insane, Claire said, her voice rising. She looked around at her friends, her professors, her future colleagues, all of them watching her unraveling in real time. He's doing this because you called me a lowlife? I offered helpfully. Yeah, that didn't help. But mostly I'm doing this because you committed fraud on your bar application. The personal vendetta is just a nice bonus. It's not fraud, she shouted, and I saw Morrison's eyebrows raise slightly. Shouting at bar officials probably wasn't the best strategy, but I wasn't about to interrupt her self-destruction. You declared yourself as financially independent, I said, still calm, still casual, like we were discussing the weather. You claimed minimal support. You failed to disclose that your spouse paid your tuition, your rent, your car payments, your insurance, your groceries, your bar prep course, and pretty much everything else for 5 years. That's called material misrepresentation, sweetheart. You should know that. You studied law. Morrison nodded slightly, confirming my assessment. The board will conduct a full investigation. You'll have an opportunity to respond to these allegations and provide documentation. However, until this matter is resolved, your license to practice law in this state is suspended. Suspended. The word hung in the air like a guillotine blade. The law firm representatives who'd been schmoozing with Claire earlier, the ones who'd probably offered her a job, who'd been talking about partnership tracks and corner offices, suddenly found reasons to be somewhere else. They started backing away like she was radioactive, pulling out their phones, probably texting their HR departments about rescinding offers. The dean of the law school, who'd been proudly posing for photos with his star graduate 30 minutes ago, cleared his throat awkwardly and headed for the exit faster than my self-respect had left on the night I realized my marriage was over. Her classmates just stared, some in shock, some in poorly concealed schadenfreude. Because let's be real, nobody makes it through law school without making a few enemies, and Claire had definitely made her share with that self-made attitude. I finished the rest of my drink in one long sip. The old-fashioned was perfectly balanced, sweet, bitter, strong, smooth. Kind of like revenge, actually. You know what's funny? Well, not funny haha, more like funny in that dark, cosmic justice kind of way. Claire's face drained of color faster than my bank account had over the past 5 years. And trust me, my bank account had drained pretty damn fast. We're talking emergency level, red alert. Sir, your card has been declined, levels of fast. But watching her standing there, holding that official letter with shaking hands, her perfect graduation party crumbling around her like a sandcastle at high tide, that was a speed I'd never seen before. It was like watching someone age 10 years in 10 seconds. The board has both the authority and the obligation to place admissions on hold pending investigation. The words character and fitness landed like a slap. I saw several of her classmates exchange glances. In the legal world, those words were basically code for, we think you might be a lying liar who lies. Character and fitness reviews were what happened when the bar thought you'd done something shady. It was the investigation they launched when they suspected you weren't trustworthy enough to be a lawyer, which, given that lawyers aren't exactly known for their overwhelming trustworthiness, was saying something. But I didn't. I mean, the support payments. Claire's voice was getting higher, more desperate. She looked around at the crowd of people watching her, and I could see the panic setting in. This wasn't supposed to happen. This was supposed to be her night, her triumph, her moment to shine and show everyone that she'd made it. Morrison held up a hand, cutting her off with a gesture that was somehow both polite and absolutely final. Ms. Richardson, I strongly advise you to consult with an attorney before making any statements. Anything you say right now could impact the board's investigation. The irony of needing to hire a lawyer when you just spent 5 years becoming one wasn't lost on anyone in that room. A few people, the ones with less social awareness or more schadenfreude, actually snickered. Someone tried to cover it with a cough, but we all heard it. Claire's eyes found mine again across the room, and if looks could kill, I'd be dead about 17 times over. The fury in her expression was almost beautiful in its purity. This wasn't just anger. This was the rage of someone who'd been caught, who knew exactly who'd caught them, and who was realizing in real time that there wasn't a damn thing they could do about it. You ruined me, she said, her voice shaking with emotion. Several people gasped at the outburst. Morrison took a subtle step back, probably trained to recognize when someone was about to completely lose it. I set my empty glass down on the bar with a soft clink that somehow carried across the silent room. When I spoke, my voice was calm, conversational, like we were discussing what to have for dinner, not the systematic destruction of her legal career. No, sweetheart, I said. I didn't ruin you. You ruined you. I just made sure the right people knew about it. There's a difference. It's subtle, but it's there. You probably would have learned about it in legal ethics if you'd paid more attention instead of assuming the rules didn't apply to you. Her hands balled into fists, crumpling the letter from the bar. You're doing this because I called you a lowlife. This is revenge. This is consequences. I interrupted, and my voice got a little harder. This is what happens when you commit fraud on official documents. This is what happens when you claim to be self-made while someone else is literally making you. This is what happens when you forget that the boring, reliable guy you married isn't actually stupid. He's just patient. And honey, my patience ran out about the same time you decided to humiliate me in front of 50 people. The officer, Morrison, cleared his throat again, clearly uncomfortable with the marital drama unfolding in front of him, but also probably fascinated because this was way better than whatever he'd planned to do on a Saturday night. Ms. Richardson, you'll receive formal notification within 24 hours outlining the specific allegations and the investigation process. You'll have an opportunity to respond in writing and provide any documentation that might be relevant. Claire wasn't listening to him anymore. She was staring at me with this expression that I'd never seen before. It was like she was seeing me, really seeing me, for the first time. Not as the convenient ATM, not as the supportive background character in her success story, not as the boring but reliable husband who'd always be there to clean up her messes and fund her dreams. She was seeing me as someone who could fight back, someone who had power, someone who'd just proven that underestimating people has consequences. And she was terrified. "How could you do this to me?" she whispered. And for just a second, she sounded like the woman I'd married. Vulnerable, human, almost sympathetic. Almost. "How could I?" I repeated, and I laughed. Actually laughed. "Claire, I worked 3 jobs for 5 years so you could go to law school. I paid every bill, every tuition payment, every bar prep fee. I ironed your blazers at 3 in the morning because you had early court simulations. I proofread your papers. I made you dinner when you were too stressed to function. I held you when you cried about exams. I believed in you when you didn't believe in yourself." I took a step closer, and the crowd parted like the Red Sea. "And tonight, at your graduation party, when I showed up with flowers and pride and the naive hope that maybe you'd want to take one picture with the man who made all of this possible, you called me a lowlife. In front of everyone. You looked me in the eye and told me I wasn't worth being photographed with." The room was so quiet you could hear people breathing. Even the bartender had stopped moving. "So yeah," I continued, "I made a phone call. I told the truth. I made sure the people who needed to know about your financial situation actually knew about it. Because here's the thing about being a lawyer, Claire, it requires honesty. It requires integrity. It requires admitting when someone helped you instead of pretending you did it all yourself." Morrison was nodding slightly, and I could see a few of her former classmates looking at her with new understanding. The story was rewriting itself in real time. An hour ago, she was the self-made success story. Now she was the woman who'd committed fraud to hide the fact that her husband had funded her entire education. Tara, who'd been frozen in shock this whole time, finally found her voice. "Claire, is this true? Did Marcus really pay for everything?" Claire's jaw clenched. She didn't answer, which was answer enough. Another classmate, some guy I vaguely recognized from a study group that had met at our apartment, the apartment I paid for, spoke up. "Wait, so when you told us you were working your way through school?" "I was studying." Claire snapped. "That was my work. That was my contribution. Just because I wasn't physically working some meaningless job doesn't mean I wasn't working." Oh, this was getting good. "So let me get this straight," I said, and I couldn't keep the amusement out of my voice. "You consider studying to be equivalent to me working 3 actual jobs? That's interesting math. Let's break it down for everyone here, shall we?" Morrison looked like he wanted to stop this, but honestly, he was probably too fascinated to intervene. Plus, everything I was saying was just providing more evidence for his investigation. "I worked 40 hours a week at an IT firm." I continued, counting on my fingers. "Another 25 hours bartending. Another 15 to 20 driving for Uber. That's roughly 80 to 85 hours of actual, paid employment per week." Claire studied. "What would you say, honey? 40 hours? 50 on a busy week? And somehow, in your mind, that makes us equal partners." A few people were pulling out their phones now, probably doing the math themselves, or maybe recording this for posterity. This was the kind of drama that would be talked about in legal circles for years. The graduation party that turned into a public trial. "You're humiliating me," Claire said, and now there were actual tears forming in her eyes. The makeup she'd so carefully applied was starting to run. "No," I said firmly. "You humiliated yourself. I'm just making sure everyone knows why." The law firm representatives who'd been courting her earlier? Gone. Vanished like smoke. The professors who'd been singing her praises? Heading for the exits with sudden urgent phone calls to make. Even some of her friends were starting to edge away, distancing themselves from the disaster. I looked around the room at all the faces staring at us, some shocked, some entertained, some deeply uncomfortable. This was going to be legendary. This was going to be the story people told at legal conferences. Remember that woman who got her bar admission suspended at her own graduation party? By her husband? The one she called a lowlife? I walked past Claire, past Morrison, past the wreckage of her perfect evening. As I headed for the door, I had one more thing to say. "Oh, and Claire." I turned back to look at her one last time. "I'll send everyone the bill for the champagne. Since apparently you're financially independent now, you can handle it." Someone actually clapped. I'm not kidding. Someone in that room of lawyers and law students and legal professionals actually started clapping. Then someone else joined in. And then a few more people. It wasn't everyone. It wasn't even most people. But it was enough to make Claire's face turn from white to red, from shock to mortification. I walked out of that rooftop party while the lowlife she'd mocked became the legend they'd be whispering about for years. The thing about making a legendary exit is that you can't look back. You can't hesitate, can't second-guess yourself, can't let anyone see even a flicker of doubt. You commit to the moment with everything you've got, and you walk out those doors like you're the main character in a movie about justified revenge and personal redemption. And right then, in that moment, I was absolutely the main character. I strode toward the exit with my head high and my conscience surprisingly clear. The scattered applause was still happening behind me. Not a standing ovation, but enough to make the point. Someone wolf whistled. Someone else called out, "You tell her, man," and I heard what sounded like Tara urgently shushing them. As I passed tables of stunned lawyers-to-be, I caught snippets of whispered conversations that were already starting. The narrative was being written in real time, and for once, I was actually in it instead of being edited out. "Did you hear what he said about working 3 jobs? She told us she put herself through school. I can't believe she actually said that to him. Is someone recording this? Oh my God, this is going on TikTok for sure." The law firm representatives, the sharks in expensive suits who'd been circling Claire like she was chum in the water, had huddled together near the bar. I caught one of them on his phone, clearly already doing damage control. "Yeah, I'm going to need you to pull that offer letter we sent to Richardson." "Yes, tonight. I don't care if it's Saturday. Janet, we've got a situation." A situation. That's what 5 years of my life had been reduced to. A situation that needed managing. The dean of the law school, Professor something or other with the impressive credentials and the reputation for being tough but fair, was speed-walking toward the exit like his tenure depended on getting out before things got worse. He'd been so proud earlier, posing with his star student, probably already planning how to use her success story in recruitment materials. Now he looked like a man who'd just realized his prize horse was actually a donkey in disguise. I reached the doors and pushed them open, stepping out into the hallway that led to the elevators. The cool air from the building's AC hit my face, and I realized I was grinning. Actually grinning like an idiot. When was the last time I'd smiled, really smiled, without forcing it? When was the last time I'd felt something other than tired, stressed, or vaguely disappointed? The elevator dinged, and the door slid open. I stepped inside and hit the button for the ground floor. As the doors started to close, I caught one last glimpse of the party through the glass walls of the venue. Claire was still standing there, surrounded by people, but looking completely alone, holding that letter from the bar like it was a death sentence. Morrison was talking to her, probably giving her more official instructions that she wasn't hearing because she was too busy processing the fact that her entire future had just been suspended. The doors closed, and I was alone in the elevator with my reflection in the polished metal walls. I looked at myself. Navy blazer, slightly rumpled from leaning against the bar, no flowers anymore, because I'd left them on her table like a funeral arrangement for our marriage. I looked tired. I looked older than 38. But I also looked satisfied in a way I hadn't felt in years. My phone buzzed. Multiple times. Like aggressive buzzing that suggested my entire contact list had suddenly decided I was the most interesting person they knew. "Chris, dude. What did you do?" "Jake. Yo. Sarah just texted me about what happened. You're a legend." "Rachel. Marcus, call me. Now. I need details." "Lisa from work. I told you. I told you she was using you. I'm sorry, but also I told you." And then, the one that made me laugh out loud in the empty elevator. "Unknown number. This is going viral. Someone posted the video. You're trending on Twitter. Hashtag #LowLifeLawLesson." I clicked on the link they'd sent, and sure enough, there it was. Someone, probably multiple someones, had recorded the whole thing and posted it online. The video started right at the moment Morrison walked up to Claire's table and ended with me walking out to scattered applause. The caption read, "Law school grad calls husband a lowlife at her party. Husband works for State Bar and gets her license suspended on the spot. The revenge is immaculate. Fire." It already had over 50,000 views, and I'd only been in the elevator for 2 minutes. The comments were exactly what you'd expect from the internet. A mix of support, schadenfreude, legal analysis, and people arguing about whether what I did was justified or petty. This is the most satisfying thing I've ever seen. He worked 3 jobs to put her through school, and she called him a lowlife? Actually, if she misrepresented her financial situation on her bar application, that is a legitimate ethics violation. He might have saved the legal profession from someone who lies on official documents. Petty king energy. I'm here for it. My man really said, let me just ruin your entire career real quick, skull. The fact that he stayed calm the whole time makes it even better. Someone get this man a medal and a better wife. The elevator reached the ground floor and the doors opened. I stepped out into the lobby and my phone immediately rang. It was Chris. Are you okay? He asked the second I answered. I'm great, I said, and I meant it. I'm actually great. Marcus, you just nuked your wife's career on her graduation night. That's pretty intense, man. She nuked it herself when she lied on her application. I corrected. I just made sure someone noticed. There's a difference. Okay, but he paused. Are you sure you're not going to regret this tomorrow? When the adrenaline wears off and you realize what you've done. I thought about that as I pushed through the building's revolving doors and stepped out onto the street. The night air was cool and clear, and the city lights were doing their thing. And somewhere behind me in that rooftop venue, Claire was probably still trying to explain her way out of something that couldn't be explained away. You know what I regret? I said into the phone. I regret the 5 years I spent believing that supporting someone meant letting them walk all over me. I regret every time I made excuses for her behavior. I regret not listening to you, to Jake, to Rachel, to Lisa, to everyone who tried to warn me. I regret ironing blazers at 3 in the morning for someone who'd eventually tell me I wasn't worth taking a picture with. I started walking down the street, no particular destination in mind, just wanting to move, to feel like I was going somewhere instead of being stuck in place. But do I regret making one phone call to report legitimate fraud on a bar application? Do I regret making sure she faces consequences for lying about her financial situation? Do I regret standing up for myself for once in 5 years? I laughed. Not even a little bit, man. Not even a little bit. Chris was quiet for a moment. Then, okay, I hear you. You need anything? Want to grab a beer? You probably shouldn't be alone right now. Actually, I said, I think alone is exactly what I need to be. I've spent 5 years not being alone, not having space to think, always being available for whatever Claire needed. I think I've earned a night to myself. All right, but call me if you change your mind. And Marcus? Yeah, that was the most epic thing I've ever witnessed secondhand. I mean, it was brutal, but it was also kind of beautiful in a weird, justice-served kind of way. I smiled. Thanks, man. I'll talk to you tomorrow. I hung up and kept walking, phone still buzzing with texts and notifications. The video was up to 200,000 views now. Someone had made a TikTok set to Before He Cheats, except the lyrics were changed to Before She Graduates. Another person had created a whole thread analyzing the legal implications of what Claire had done and why I was technically right to report it. I was trending. Me, Marcus Hale. Boring, reliable, 3 jobs working Marcus Hale was trending on social media because I'd finally stood up for myself. A notification popped up. Claire was calling. I looked at her name on the screen, watched it ring once, twice, 3 times. Then I did something that felt almost as good as walking out of that party. I declined the call and blocked her number. My phone immediately rang again, her mother this time. Mrs. Richardson, who'd always treated me like I was lucky to be married to her daughter, who'd never once thanked me for supporting Claire through school, who'd probably been at that party watching the whole thing unfold. I blocked her too. Then Claire's father. Blocked. Tara. Blocked. I was on a blocking spree, and it felt amazing. Every number that represented that toxic world I'd been living in got deleted from my life with a single tap. By the time I reached the corner, my phone had finally stopped buzzing quite so aggressively. I found a bench and sat down, just breathing, just existing in a moment that belonged entirely to me. A woman walked by walking her dog, some kind of designer breed that probably cost more than my car, and the dog stopped to sniff my shoes. The woman looked at me, then did a double take. Oh my God, she said. You're the guy from the video. The low-life law lesson guy. I blinked. I've been out of that party for less than 10 minutes. How do you already? She held up her phone. It's everywhere. Twitter, TikTok, Instagram, Reddit. You're like internet famous right now. She paused. That took guts, what you did. My ex-husband did something similar to me. Used me to get through business school, and then traded me in for someone younger the second he got his MBA. I wish I'd had the chance to do what you did. I'm sorry that happened to you, I said, and meant it. Don't be. Best thing that ever happened to me, honestly. Got rid of dead weight and found myself again. She smiled. You're going to be okay. Better than okay, probably. Any woman worth having will see what you did and respect the hell out of it. Her dog finished sniffing my shoes, and they walked off, leaving me alone on the bench with that thought. Any woman worth having will respect what you did. I pulled out my phone one more time and opened Twitter. The video was still climbing, 500,000 views now. Someone had edited it with dramatic music. Someone else had made it into a meme format. A bunch of verified accounts were commenting on it. And then I saw it. An article already published on some online legal news site. The headline read, "Man called lowlife at wife's graduation party teaches everyone about legal ethics and karma." I was the story. After 5 years of being edited out, I was finally the story. And you know what? It felt pretty damn good. The next morning, I woke up to my phone absolutely losing its mind. Like nuclear meltdown levels of notifications. I'm talking hundreds of texts, missed calls, voicemails, Instagram DMs from people I hadn't spoken to since high school, Facebook friend requests from strangers, and even a LinkedIn message that just said, "Yo." That was cold-blooded, and I respect it. I made coffee, the good stuff I'd been saving for a special occasion, and honestly, destroying your wife's career at her own party counts as special, and settled in to read through the carnage. Claire's mom was first. How could you humiliate her like that? After everything she's done for you? You're a spiteful, petty man, and I hope you're happy with yourself. After everything she's done for me. That was rich. What exactly had she done for me besides let me work myself half to death while she studied? The audacity was truly breathtaking. Claire had apparently created a new number just to text me. You ruined my life. I hope you're proud of yourself. 5 years together, and this is how you treat me? I can't believe I ever loved you. Her professor, the one who'd speed-walked out of the party, had somehow gotten my number. Mr. Hale, what happened last night was unexpected. The university would appreciate your discretion moving forward. Translation, please stop making us look bad for graduating someone who committed fraud. And then my favorite text of all came from one of her ex-classmates, someone named Derek who I vaguely remembered from study groups. Dude, you're trending on TikTok. The lowlife law lesson. Someone made a remix of the video with that She Belongs to the Streets song. It has 1.2 million views. This is incredible. I clicked the link he sent. Sure enough, there it was. The whole scene, professionally edited with dramatic music, slow-motion effects on Claire's face when Morrison said suspended, and text overlays pointing out the best moments. The comments were absolutely savage. 3 weeks later, I moved into a new apartment overlooking the river. 1 bedroom, hardwood floors, big windows that let in actual sunlight, the kind of place I could have never afforded when I was funding someone else's dreams. It was peaceful, quiet, and 100% drama-free. No blazers to iron, no tuition bills to pay, no passive-aggressive comments about how I wasn't ambitious enough. Claire's bar suspension made headlines in legal circles. Turns out, misrepresenting your financial situation on official documents is exactly the kind of thing that makes licensing boards very, very angry. Her investigation was ongoing, but word on the street, courtesy of Derek, who'd become my unexpected source for law school gossip, was that she'd need to wait at least a year before reapplying, and even then, she'd have to explain the ethics violation to every potential employer forever. She called me one last time, crying, begging for forgiveness. Asked if we could start over, if I'd help her fix this, if maybe I could talk to the board on her behalf. I told her what I should have told her years ago. I don't hold grudges, Claire. I just keep receipts. When she asked if we could reconcile, I smiled into the phone. Sure. Right after you graduate from Humility School. I hear they have a great program. Very intensive. She hung up. These days, I mentor young entrepreneurs at a local business incubator, teaching them about protecting their assets and their hearts. I tell them my story, all of it, and watch them take notes like their lives depend on it. Because sometimes they do. Last week, I went back to that rooftop bar. Same place, different energy. The bartender recognized me immediately and grinned. Another old-fashioned, heavy on the irony. I smiled back. Make it a double. I'm celebrating. Celebrating what? My degree, I said, settling into my seat. PhD in poetic justice. Just graduated. My wife's new boyfriend moved into our $2.40 million home the day our divorce finalized. You'll die poor and alone, she texted. That night, my phone rang. The voice said, "This is the Pentagon. Your grandfather's classified mission has been declassified. The inheritance he couldn't claim for 60 years was worth $156 million. But the condition to claim it. You ever watch your life get repossessed in real time? It's a hell of a spectator sport." The movers came at 10 a.m. sharp, all business and biceps, hauling a grand piano through the doorway like they were smuggling luxury into a crime scene. It gleamed, not just polished, but smug, like it knew it was replacing something sentimental. They positioned it right where my grandfather's war medals used to hang, the same wall that once made visitors pause and whisper, "Wow, he served." Now, it was just a backdrop for Bianca's new decor choices. She always had a thing for symbolism. Apparently, I was just another antique to replace. I watched them from the kitchen floor, socked feet sliding on cold tile, holding the final divorce decree like it was a receipt for a bad purchase. The house, our house, had been appraised at $2.4 million, though Bianca called it an investment in lifestyle. She'd been half right. She got the lifestyle, I got the invoice. Marble countertops, infinity pool that looked like an Instagram filter, the soundproof studio where I used to compose. I built that place note by note, hour by hour, every late-night gig and coffee-fueled rehearsal poured into it. And now, that same studio had a "Welcome Adrian" doormat. I knew because Bianca sent me a picture of it, a neat little snapshot of my defeat. Caption, "Congrats on your new studio apartment." Then came the encore text, "You'll die poor and alone." A little confetti emoji at the end, just for taste. Bianca had this talent for turning cruelty into performance art. I could almost hear her sipping champagne as she typed. Her new husband Adrian probably adjusting his cufflinks beside her, the two of them laughing like villains in a PG-13 movie. I wanted to laugh too. Really, I did. But instead, I just sat there, scrolling through our old photos like an idiot, watching myself smile in pictures that now looked like evidence of a crime. I finally typed back, "Enjoy the bass notes." It wasn't much, but it was better than what I wanted to send, which involved creative use of emojis and a flamethrower. Then the phone rang. No name, just a string of zeros and a single one at the end, the kind of number that screams, you're either being scammed or recruited by aliens. I almost ignored it. But curiosity is the only thing I had left that wasn't in Bianca's name. "This is the Pentagon," the voice said. Now, normally, that's the sort of sentence that should come before something like, "Your country needs you." Not, "Your divorce just finalized." But there I was, sitting in the ruins of my kitchen, half a bagel in one hand, government intrigue in the other. I said, because apparently that's how my brain processes surprise. "The Pentagon? Like the building?" "Yes, sir," the voice replied, flat as a drill sergeant's haircut. "Is this Mr. Marcus Hale?" "That depends. Is this about student loans?" "No, sir. It's regarding Arthur McRae." That name hit like static in my chest. My grandfather. The man who could turn a piano into a confessional booth. He died when I was 12. Heart attack, mid-concert, front row full of diplomats. I'd never understood why he'd been so secretive about his past, why my grandmother used to say things like, "Arthur saw too much music in too many dark rooms." I thought it was poetic nonsense. Turns out, it might have been government code. "Your grandfather's mission has been declassified," the voice continued. "After 60 years. There are assets he couldn't claim in his lifetime. You've been identified as his next of kin." I blinked. "Wait, so you're saying?" "There is an inheritance," he said. "Estimated value, $156 million. I actually laughed. Not a normal laugh, the kind that escapes when your brain short-circuits. "Right. And I assume all I have to do is wire a small processing fee to a prince in Delaware." Silence. Then, "This is not a solicitation, Mr. Hale. A Colonel Price will contact you shortly with formal documentation." Click. The call ended. I sat there, staring at my phone like it had just confessed a murder. A minute later, I actually checked the clock, half expecting the Twilight Zone theme to start playing. My life had gone from divorced and broke to potential government beneficiary in under 60 seconds. I should have been thrilled, but instead, I just felt tired. Like someone had handed me a winning lottery ticket printed on sandpaper. Because here's the thing, when you've lost everything, money doesn't sound like salvation. It sounds like another setup. Bianca had taught me that the hard way. There's always fine print somewhere, usually in the form of a person you trust with a pen. The air in the kitchen felt heavier now. I picked up the decree again, the one stamped and signed by a judge who probably wore pity like cologne. Equitable division, it said, which apparently means she gets everything and you get character development. I looked around. The piano movers were gone, but the smell of furniture polish still lingered, mixing with the faint perfume Bianca used to wear. Expensive, sharp, the kind that makes you nostalgic for things that never really existed. My old studio, my sanctuary, was now someone else's cigar lounge. I could picture it. Adrian Cross, lounging on the leather couch I bought, lighting up a Cuban like it's a victory cigar. He'd probably tell guests, "This used to belong to the musician my wife left," and everyone would laugh, because that's what people do when money speaks louder than conscience. I opened my phone again and scrolled to Bianca's text. "Congrats on your new studio apartment." I typed a draft reply. "Thanks. It comes with ghosts and government calls." I deleted it. Too honest. Instead, I just sent her a single treble clef emoji. Let her overthink it. Then my brain started replaying the call. Declassified mission. Assets. Arthur McRae. My grandfather, the piano man who used to hum lullabies in minor keys. He'd been part of something secret, something worth millions? None of it made sense. I tried to remember any hint he'd left, any weird stories from my childhood. I remembered the way he'd lock his old journal in a wooden box and say, "Someday, Marcus, this will make sense." At 12, I thought he meant music theory. Turns out, he meant generational trauma with a price tag. A knock came at the door. For a second, I thought the Pentagon had really upgraded their response time. But it was just my neighbor, Mr. Dwyer, 80, nosy, and the self-appointed mayor of the cul-de-sac. He peeked inside like he was casing the joint. "Son, I saw the movers," he said. "Rough day." "Yeah," I said, forcing a smile. "My ex-wife just turned my studio into a jazz lounge." He whistled low. "Damn shame. You keeping the piano?" "Nope. That's part of the ex-wife's redecoration project." He nodded sagely. "Ah, the old replace his soul with mahogany move. Classic." I laughed despite myself. "Yeah, you could say that." When he left, the silence came back, thick and humming. I sat there, trying to decide what hurt more, losing the house or realizing I didn't actually miss Bianca. What I missed was the version of me that still believed in happy duets. My phone buzzed again. Unknown number. I hesitated, then picked up. "Mr. Hale," the same crisp voice said. "Colonel Price here. I understand you were contacted about your grandfather." "Yeah," I said. "The whole Pentagon and $156 million thing. That's not a scam." "No, sir. We're sending an officer with documentation. There are conditions." "Of course there are," I muttered. "Nothing says family legacy like a government disclaimer." "You will receive a courier package within the hour," he continued. "Do not discard it. It will contain coordinates, instructions, and identification for verification. You'll also need an item in your possession, a leather-bound journal belonging to your grandfather." I froze. "You mean the box labeled Arthur's things? Do not touch." "Precisely. Keep it secure." Then he hung up. No goodbye, no explanation, just bureaucratic mic drop. I stared at the wall, at the ghostly outline where my grandfather's medals once hung. The house didn't feel like mine anymore. It felt like a museum I'd been evicted from. And now, apparently, it was also the prologue to a spy movie I hadn't auditioned for. Bianca used to say I was predictable, that I liked structure, routine, the same coffee mug every morning. She wasn't wrong. But right then, predictability was gone, replaced by mystery, bitterness, and a potential inheritance the size of a symphony budget. I dragged myself off the floor, grabbed the box marked Arthur's things, and placed it on the counter. Dust puffed into the air like an old secret exhaling. The leather journal sat on top, tied with a ribbon that had probably seen more history than I had common sense. On the first page, written in my grandfather's looping hand, was a line I'd never noticed before. "When the music ends, follow the silence." I didn't know what that meant yet, but it felt like the kind of phrase that changes everything. The kind of thing you only understand after your world is burned down and someone starts playing piano on the ashes. So I poured myself a drink, took one last look around the house I'd built and lost, and said out loud, to no one in particular, "Move out day complete." Somewhere in the distance, I could almost hear Arthur's piano, soft, deliberate, haunting, as if the universe had just queued up the next track. And just like that, the world's worst housewarming became the first note of something bigger. 2 months earlier, my life still looked like a polished magazine spread. I was the man with the violin, the tailored suit, and the illusion that talent could protect you from betrayal. The concerts were packed, the critics were generous, and Bianca was still showing up, though, in hindsight, her presence had the emotional temperature of a tax audit. She'd sit in the third row, arms crossed, posture perfect, face as unreadable as a Supreme Court decision. The Bianca I used to know, the one who screamed bravo, loud enough to make ushers flinch, had vanished somewhere between rehearsal dinners and real estate listings. That night, I remember finishing a Mendelssohn piece that usually earned standing ovations. Instead, I got polite applause, the kind that sounds like people are clapping for your effort, not your art. I bowed, smiled, and locked eyes with Bianca for half a second. She smiled back, but it wasn't warmth. It was something else, polite detachment, maybe pity. The kind of smile people give an employee they're about to fire but still need to finish the shift. I told myself not to overthink it. Musicians are trained to ignore distractions, coughing, cell phones, existential dread, all just part of the performance. So I put on the show. I lifted my violin, closed my eyes, and pretended that applause still meant approval, that love was still hiding somewhere in the echoes. But deep down I knew. The music was still there, the marriage wasn't. After the show, backstage was its usual chaos. Bouquets, fake smiles, patrons pretending they'd understood the emotional complexity of the cadenza. Bianca was nowhere to be found. My manager, Louise, handed me a bottle of champagne with a grin that looked like it had been practiced in the mirror. "You did great, Marcus. One critic said you play like your soul's on fire." "Yeah," I said, forcing a smile. "That's just acid reflux and denial." When I finally found Bianca, she was outside, standing under the marquee lights, talking to a man whose watch cost more than my car. Tall, broad-shouldered, the kind of guy whose handshake probably came with a non-disclosure agreement, Adrian Cross. I knew him by reputation. He owned half the construction skyline and all the charm of a Bond villain with a trust fund. Bianca introduced us with the enthusiasm of a hostage. "Marcus, this is Adrian. He's one of the sponsors for the new arts wing downtown." Adrian extended a hand, flashing a smile that could melt glaciers and ethics simultaneously. "I've heard a lot about you. Bianca says you're passionate." "Yeah," I said, shaking his hand. "That's musician code for broke, but committed." He laughed, the kind of laugh that told me he didn't actually find it funny. "Art is important," he said, "even if it doesn't pay the bills." I wanted to respond, but Bianca jumped in. "Adrian's company builds performance halls, Marcus. He's basically your fairy god developer." I raised an eyebrow. Good to know the arts are safe in the hands of capitalism. She shot me a look, the kind that said, "Not now." But the damage was done. Adrian smiled again, and I could already tell he'd file that moment under people who underestimate me. Over the next few weeks, Adrian became a recurring character, the kind of presence that shows up uninvited and then somehow ends up hosting. Bianca mentioned him constantly. "Adrian thinks you should do a residency. Adrian says your website needs better branding. Adrian's wife is a big fan." That last one, for some reason, made my skin crawl. I tried to play the supportive husband, the one who brings wine to dinner parties, nods politely while listening to billionaires discuss artistic value, and pretends not to notice when his wife's laughter starts changing keys. Bianca had always been ambitious, but this was different. She was calculating. Every move, every compliment, every sip of wine seemed rehearsed. One night, I came home early from rehearsal. Bianca was in the kitchen, still in her work blouse, staring at her phone like it held divine secrets. She didn't hear me come in. "Rough day?" I asked. She jumped, quickly locking the screen. "Oh yeah, just work." "Who were you texting?" "Louise," she said too quickly. "About your tour schedule." "Right?" I said, nodding like a man who didn't believe a single syllable. "Because my manager definitely needs hour-long texts about my itinerary." She rolled her eyes. "You're paranoid." "No," I said, pouring myself a drink. "Just observant. Comes with the job." She stormed off before I could say anything else. I remember standing there, glass in hand, watching the door she'd slammed, wondering when our conversations had turned into rehearsals for our eventual court transcripts. A week later, my nephew Jonah, smart kid, 22, social media savant with too much time on his hands, texted me a photo. No message, just an image. Bianca and Adrian. Rooftop bar. Her hand on his chest. His tie loosened, her smile unguarded. They looked like the cover of a magazine I didn't subscribe to. I didn't reply. I didn't even breathe. I just stared at that photo until my phone dimmed. Then I played scales for 4 hours straight, the way addicts reach for another drink. Every note felt mechanical, every vibrato a form of denial. By midnight, my fingers were raw, my heart numb. The next morning, Bianca acted normal, too normal. She made pancakes, asked about my rehearsal, kissed me on the cheek like she wasn't starring in her own soap opera. I went along with it because confrontation requires energy, and mine was in foreclosure. Then came the charity gala, one of those black tie events where everyone pretends to care about art while secretly networking for tax write-offs. Bianca insisted I perform, saying it would raise our profile. Translation: smile for my new donor circle. I played flawlessly that night. Every note was a controlled explosion, every bow stroke an act of revenge disguised as art. When I finished, the applause thundered. I took my bow and saw Bianca in the crowd, standing next to Adrian, her hand grazing his arm, her lips curling in that same polite smile I used to get. That was the night I learned how humiliation feels in Dolby surround sound. After the gala, I didn't say anything. We drove home in silence. The kind of silence that hums louder than traffic. She stared out the window. I stared at the steering wheel. When we pulled into the driveway, she finally spoke. "You were amazing tonight." "Yeah," I said. "You should tell that to Adrian. He seems to enjoy the performances." Her head snapped toward me, eyes flashing. "What's that supposed to mean?" I parked, killed the engine, and turned to her. "You know exactly what it means." For a second, her face flickered, guilt, panic, calculation, then settled into something icy. "You're overreacting." "Really?" "Because my nephew has photographic evidence that suggests otherwise." She laughed, sharp and humorless. "You had your spy follow me?" "Jonah sent it on his own. Guess betrayal makes good content now." She opened the door, her heels clicking against the pavement like gunshots. "Maybe if you spent more time being a husband and less time being a detective, I wouldn't need someone who actually listens." And just like that, she walked inside, leaving me alone with the echo of every wrong note I'd ever played. The next morning, she acted like nothing happened. Coffee brewing, music humming through the speakers, like our marriage hadn't flatlined 12 hours earlier. That's the thing about living with someone who lies. They're disturbingly good at it. I went on tour the following week, partly because it was scheduled, mostly because I needed to breathe somewhere that didn't smell like deceit and overpriced candles. Each concert felt like therapy, public, loud, temporary. I poured everything into those performances. The critics said I was redefining the emotional spectrum of classical music. What I was really doing was bleeding in 4/4 time. Every city blurred into the next. Paris, Vienna, London, but the loneliness didn't fade. Bianca's texts got fewer, colder. "Proud of you," she'd send, followed by a photo of her with Adrian at another event. It was like she wanted me to suffer in high definition. Then came the final concert of the tour, the one in Vienna. I remember standing on stage, bow poised, lights blinding, and thinking, this is what it feels like to be applauded for dying slowly. I played through tears I refused to shed, through heartbreak disguised as art. After the encore, I walked off stage, checked my phone, and saw another message from Bianca. "We need to talk." That was it. No punctuation, no emotion. Just an empty sentence from an empty heart. I didn't reply. Instead, I looked out at the Vienna skyline, beautiful, distant, indifferent, and realized I'd been performing for people my whole life. First for audiences, then for her. Always clapping, never listening. That night, I made a promise to myself. I'd finish the tour, come home, and face whatever song came next, even if it meant silence. Because sometimes, silence isn't peace. It's preparation. You ever walk into your own kitchen and feel like you're trespassing? That's exactly how it felt that night. 2 weeks after the Vienna concert, I dragged my suitcase through the front door and straight into a crime scene of politeness. Everything was spotless, the kind of spotless that comes from guilt, not pride. The kitchen smelled like lemon cleaner and tension. And there she was, Bianca, scribbling something in her leather planner, barefoot, humming like she hadn't detonated our marriage months ago. "Hey," she said, without looking up. "You're back early." "Yeah, figured I'd surprise my wife," I said, dropping my suitcase by the counter. "Turns out, I should have called ahead. Might have missed the other guy." She froze for half a second that told me everything I needed to know, then smiled that rehearsed little smile she used for donors and judges. "Don't start, Marcus." "Start what?" I asked. The conversation where I asked my wife why our nephew's photography hobby caught her in 4K playing tongue hockey with a venture capitalist? She sighed, slow and dramatic, like she'd rehearsed that too. "You live in the past," she said. "You hold on to every mistake, every look, every betrayal?" I interrupted. "Yeah, I'm weird like that." She put the pen down, crossed her arms, and tilted her head the way lawyers do before they say something cruel but legally safe. "You don't understand, Marcus. Adrian builds things that last. You play things that disappear." And there it was, the symphony of betrayal condensed into one perfectly devastating sentence. I wanted to laugh, or throw something, or both, but all I could do was nod like a man grading his own obituary. "Right," I said. "He builds things that last. Like trust funds. And marriages. Oh wait. No. That one's under construction." She rolled her eyes. "This bitterness doesn't suit you." "Neither did the prenup," I muttered. Her lips twitched. "You signed it." "Yeah," I said. "Because I thought you'd keep your vows." "My bad." The air between us thickened. Heavy, humid, unbreathable. I leaned on the counter, staring at the stupid little live, laugh, love magnet on the fridge that I'd always hated, but she insisted on keeping. The irony hit different now. "I thought we were done talking," I said, reaching for the mug that used to be mine. She pushed a file across the table. "Divorce settlement. My lawyer and I finalized the adjustments." "Your lawyer?" I said. "You mean your dad's golf buddy, right? What's his name, Trent? The guy who wears pink polos and thinks feminism is a sports team." "Don't be childish." "Oh, I passed childish around the time your boyfriend started showing up at charity dinners in my tuxedo jacket." She sighed again, the sigh of someone who's already rewritten the story and cast herself as the victim. "I'm keeping the house," she said. "And the studio." "The studio?" I said. "That's your music room." "I know," she said, interrupting. "But it's part of the property, and I need the space for my design projects. You can take your instruments." I blinked. "You're evicting me from my own sanctuary, so you can store mood boards and mood lighting?" "It's practical," she said simply. "Sure," I said. "And stabbing someone's heart is just cardiovascular exercise." She ignored me. "You'll have enough from the accounts to start over." "Start over where, Bianca? In a shoebox? Maybe I can sublet your conscience." Her phone buzzed. She smiled. "Adrian's here." Of course he was. When he walked in, he didn't even flinch. Just nodded at me like I was a service provider. "Marcus," he said smoothly. "You play beautifully." "Thanks," I said. "You steal wives beautifully." He chuckled, like I'd complimented his tie. "It's not personal. People change." "Right," I said. "Some people change addresses, others change morals." Bianca shot me a warning look. "Marcus." "No, it's fine," I said. "I just want to make sure I'm properly humiliated before the movers get here." Adrian smiled. "We should keep things amicable." "Amicable?" I stepped forward. "You're standing in my kitchen, drinking coffee from my mug, in a house I paid for, with a woman I loved. And you want amicable?" He shrugged. "It's just life, man." I laughed, a sharp, hollow sound. "Life. Right. Some of us practice it, others buy it wholesale." Bianca grabbed her purse. "I'm going to the attorney's office. We'll finish this later." And just like that, they left. My house, my kitchen, my life, emptied like the last note of a bad encore. I sank into the nearest chair, the one with the tiny scratch on the armrest from when Bianca and I had tried to assemble it ourselves. Back then, we'd laughed about it, said it gave the house character. Now it just gave me heartburn. That's when my dad, Henry, showed up. My mother had called him, apparently, because when your marriage implodes, the parental bat signal goes off automatically. He walked in holding a brown bag and 2 cups of diner coffee. Figured you might need breakfast, and someone who remembers when you had hair. I managed a weak smile. Thanks, Dad. He looked around. So this is the battlefield, huh? Yeah, I said. Bianca left her victory flag in the driveway. He sat down across from me. Listen, son, women like her, they don't fall out of love. They fall into something shinier. You just got caught in the reflection. Great pep talk, I said. Do I get a participation trophy too? He chuckled. You got her out of your life. That's reward enough. My mother, Rose, showed up a few minutes later, eyes red, holding a casserole dish because emotions in our family always came baked with cheese. She hugged me tight and whispered, "She doesn't deserve your music." Maybe not, I said, but she sure got half the royalties. Then came Malik, my cousin, journalist, conspiracy enthusiast, chaos connoisseur. He dropped his duffel on the table like he'd been summoned for a covert operation. Heard the queen of designer deceit finally took the throne, he said. Yeah, I said. Long live the drama. He smirked. You keeping that old box labeled Arthur's things? I remember Grandpa Arthur used to guard that thing like it held state secrets. It's in the closet, I said. Why? He shrugged. Call it a hunch. Families that lose everything sometimes find other things. I laughed. What, like wisdom? He grinned. Or literal treasure. Could go either way. I didn't know it then, but he wasn't joking. Later that evening, after everyone left, I sat in the living room surrounded by half-packed boxes. I found myself staring at the one Malik mentioned. Old cardboard, taped edges, handwriting faded but clear. Arthur's things, do not touch. I remembered being 10, watching my grandfather lock his journal away, humming some melody that didn't sound like anything he ever played in public. Music is just math with emotion, he'd said once. Hide the right equation, and no one can steal your soul. Back then, I thought it was poetic nonsense. Now it felt like foreshadowing. I opened the box just a little, enough to see the cracked leather of the journal, a few yellowed pages, and an old photo of him shaking hands with someone in uniform. The date on the back, 1964. Cambodia. I closed it again. Whatever ghosts lived in that box could wait until I figured out how to pay rent without selling my violin. That night, I poured myself a drink, turned off the lights, and let the quiet swallow me whole. The house creaked like it was trying to say something. I imagined Arthur's voice, calm, deliberate, whispering through the walls. When the music stops, listen closer. And for the first time since Bianca walked out, I did. The call came the morning after my emotional hangover had finally graduated to a full-blown identity crisis. I was halfway through a microwaved breakfast burrito, my third that week, when my phone lit up with another anonymous number. Because of course it did. My new fan club apparently included the IRS, spam loan sharks, and the occasional ghost of my grandfather. Mr. Hale, said a voice so crisp it could have cut glass. This is Colonel Price, United States Department of Defense. I almost choked on the burrito. Okay, I said after a heroic cough. You're going to have to narrow that down. Is this about taxes or aliens? Neither, sir, the colonel replied, dry as sandpaper. I believe you spoke briefly with one of our representatives yesterday regarding your grandfather, Arthur McCrae. I sat up straighter, brushing tortilla crumbs off my sweatpants. Right, that's the call I thought was an elaborate prank by my cousin. The one where you said my dead grandfather might have left behind enough money to buy Delaware. Not quite Delaware, he said, with the faintest trace of military sarcasm. But you may want to sit down. I'm already sitting, I said. It's just less of a chair situation and more of a life collapse on the couch situation. He ignored that. Your grandfather was part of a classified operation during the 1960s, Operation Night Music. It's recently been declassified, and with that, certain funds have been unlocked. I leaned forward. Funds. Mr. McCrae was instrumental in recovering and securing assets that, due to legal complications, were never distributed. The department has authorized restitution to his next of kin. You. Okay, I said slowly. You realize this sounds exactly like the setup to a Netflix documentary, right? The part where the gullible grandson gets framed for espionage. There was a pause, the kind that could make a man sweat. Mr. Hale, this is legitimate. You'll be receiving documentation within the hour, along with instructions. But there's a stipulation. Of course there was. There's always a stipulation. My life had basically turned into a warning policy. What kind of stipulation? Your grandfather left behind an artifact, a leather-bound journal. Our records show it's in your possession. I turned slowly toward the box Malik had pointed out, still sitting on the counter like a cursed treasure chest. You mean the one labeled "Do Not Touch"? Yeah, I've got it. Good, he said. That journal contains encoded information critical to the release of the inheritance. You are to bring it, unopened and intact, to the address listed in the documentation. There will be an escort waiting. An escort? I repeated. You mean like a guy in a suit or a guy with an actual gun? Preferably both. Comforting, I said. Then came the kicker. That tone shift people use before delivering bad news. Mr. Hale, the colonel continued, there is one more thing. You should be aware that certain individuals may attempt to interfere. We recommend discretion. I frowned. Interfere? With what? My breakfast. This matter involves corporate holdings, international accounts, and legacy contracts. Some of these companies still exist under different names. You may recognize one of them, Cross Manufacturing. I froze. Wait, Cross. As in Adrian Cross? Yes, sir. My brain did a full pirouette. Adrian. Of course his name would show up in a classified military conversation. Because why wouldn't the man who stole my wife also be casually linked to my grandfather's mysterious inheritance? The universe didn't just throw curveballs at me. It launched them out of cannons. Let me get this straight, I said slowly. My ex-wife's new husband's family business is connected to my grandfather's secret Cold War operation? That appears to be the case, the colonel said. Your grandfather's notes suggest there were questionable transactions made through that company during the 1960s. If those records are exposed, certain people may have concerns. Concerns, I repeated. That's a fun euphemism for panic in lawyers. Indeed, he said. That's why you must proceed carefully. The inheritance isn't merely money. It's leverage. Leverage for what? You'll understand once you read the journal. And with that, he hung up. No goodbye. No, thank you for your time. Just silence, heavy and final. I stared at the phone for a full minute, waiting for it to ring again. Maybe this time from an alternate timeline where my life made sense. Nothing. Just the hum of the refrigerator and the faint echo of my career circling the drain. I opened the box. The smell hit first. Old leather and dust, like time itself had a scent. Inside, wrapped in faded cloth, was the journal. It looked fragile, yet deliberate, as if the pages had been waiting for me specifically. I ran my fingers over the embossed initials, AM. My grandfather's handwriting had always been neat, military neat, the kind that made you feel lazy just looking at it. I untied the ribbon and flipped to the first page. A single sentence stared back at me, written in that same crisp penmanship. When silence speaks, follow its rhythm. Great. My grandfather left me a fortune and a riddle. The next few pages were filled with what looked like music, sheet compositions, chord progressions, tempo markings. But between the lines, tiny numbers and letters were penciled in, too precise to be random. I recognized some: latitude, longitude, coordinates. Others looked like bank routing codes. Jesus, Grandpa, I whispered. You hid money in Mozart? As if on cue, my phone buzzed again. A text from Malik. Malik, you alive? Me, define alive. Malik, Mom says she heard you talking to the Pentagon. Please tell me you're not joining the Space Force. Me, long story. Grandpa's journal might lead to money. Big money. Also, Adrian Cross might be involved. Malik, well damn. That's not a story, that's a headline. Want me to look into it? Me, not yet. Let me see what's in this thing first. I stared back at the pages. My fingers shook a little. It wasn't the money that rattled me. Adrian's empire had roots that went deep, but I'd never imagined they reached into classified history. The man didn't just ruin marriages. Apparently, he inherited corruption too. I spent the next hour decoding as much as I could. Every few pages had phrases written between the staves: Budapest, Klinov, Transit 219. I Googled them, and only one hit came up. A brief article about a 1964 military operation that had gone dark. The report mentioned lost assets and an unnamed American cryptographer, Arthur McRae. I rubbed my temples. I wasn't built for this kind of intrigue. I was a musician, not a codebreaker. The closest I'd come to espionage was sneaking snacks into rehearsal halls. That's when I noticed something at the back of the journal, An envelope taped to the cover. My name written on it. Marcus Hale. The handwriting looked older, shakier, but still familiar. I tore it open. Inside was a letter. My dear Marcus, if you are reading this, it means life has done to you what it does to every man who dares to believe in permanence. It has corrected you. I couldn't claim what was rightfully mine, but perhaps you can. You will be contacted by those who know the truth. Do not trust them fully, but do not dismiss them either. Bring this journal where they instruct. When you have nothing left to lose, you will understand what to gain. I read it 3 times, trying to decide if that was wisdom or manipulation. Either way, I was officially in a plotline no sane man would volunteer for. A knock sounded at the door, loud, deliberate. I froze. I opened it to find a man in a dark suit and aviators standing on the porch. He had federal employee written all over him, from the posture to the lack of personality. Mr. Hale? Depends who's asking. He flashed a badge. U.S. Department of Defense Courier. I have your packet. He handed me a sealed envelope, made me sign something that looked way too official for my signature, and left without a word. The whole exchange took 30 seconds. Inside the envelope was a formal letter from Colonel Price, stamped, signed, intimidating. It listed a time, location, and one chilling line. Bring the journal. You have 72 hours. 72 hours. I sat there, the weight of it settling in like a piano dropping from the sky. Then came another text, from Bianca. Because of course. Bianca, heard you got a call from the government. Should I be worried? Me. Only if you still have cross-manufacturing stock. Bianca, excuse me? Me. Never mind. Enjoy your designer war crimes. I tossed the phone aside, laughing darkly. If karma had a sense of humor, it was finally warming up. I took one last look around my apartment, the cluttered shelves, the violin case by the door, the half-eaten burrito still sitting on the table, and said out loud, "All right, Grandpa. Let's see what kind of mess you left me." Somewhere deep down, under the sarcasm and skepticism, something stirred. Hope, maybe. Or madness. Hard to tell the difference anymore. I grabbed my jacket, the journal, and my car keys. The world outside felt different, sharper, quieter, like the calm before a symphony's opening note. And for the first time in a long time, I wasn't thinking about Bianca or Adrian or the ruins of what I'd lost. I was thinking about Arthur McCrae, the man who'd hidden a fortune in melodies and left me to play the final movement. If you've never had a government-issued countdown clock ruin your breakfast, I don't recommend it. The morning after Colonel Price's call, I woke up to find a sealed envelope slid under my door like the universe's version of a pop quiz. Inside, a document thicker than my divorce file, stamped with words that made my stomach tighten. 72-hour compliance mandate. Translation: you've got 3 days to figure out your dead grandfather's treasure hunt, or the government keeps the loot and probably files you under idiot. I sat at my kitchen counter, staring at the clock, one hand clutching my coffee, the other flipping through the folder. Every page looked like it had been written by a lawyer who'd been dared to make English unrecognizable. Per the stipulations of Operation Night Music's post-classification inheritance clause, it read, claimant must fulfill the procedural sequence as encoded within subject AM's personal documentation. Right. Because that totally sounds like something a normal person can wake up and deal with. At the bottom of the first page, in handwriting that looked painfully human amid all the bureaucratic nonsense, was a note. When the melody ends, find the first movement. I muttered to myself, fantastic. I'm one riddle away from turning into a Nicolas Cage character. The clock on my phone read 8:04 a.m. 72 hours meant I had until 8:04 a.m. Thursday. 3 days to uncover the legacy of a man who used to hide candy in piano legs. I looked at the journal again. Arthur's writing filled the margins like he was arguing with himself. Man, he said, grinning, you're living in a telenovela written by the IRS. We spent the next hour decoding Arthur's journal like 2 underqualified cryptographers. Malik spread out papers on the counter while I played fragments of the notations on my violin. Each melody carried strange pauses, repeated patterns that didn't make sense musically but made perfect sense mathematically. Dude, Malik said, scribbling numbers. I think he turned this sonata into a cipher. Each note equals a number. I raised an eyebrow. You're telling me my grandfather composed a secret bank code? He grinned. You tell me. You're the musician. We followed the pattern until we found something that looked like a date, June 19th, 64, followed by a word, Budapest. Was he there? I asked. Malik shook his head. No record of him overseas in 64. But guess who was? He turned his laptop to face me. An old newspaper clipping showed Adrian Cross Sr., founder of Cross Manufacturing, shaking hands with a man in uniform. My grandfather. Caption: U.S. contract secured for overseas reconstruction. I felt the hair on my arms rise. Holy hell. My grandfather and Adrian's grandfather worked together? Looks like it, Malik said. Which means this isn't just inheritance. It's unfinished business. Before I could reply, my phone buzzed. Unknown number again. Because why not? I answered. Mr. Hale, came Colonel Price's steady tone. Have you located the journal? Yes, sir, I said. Currently decoding it between coffee refills. You understand the conditions? 72 hours, or the government gets to redecorate with my inheritance money. Yeah, I got the memo. He didn't laugh. Mr. Hale, this is serious. Your grandfather's work involved sensitive materials. The funds you're pursuing aren't merely monetary. They're classified compensation tied to wartime contracts. Mishandling could constitute a federal offense. Fantastic, I said. So either I solve my family's Sudoku puzzle, or I go to jail for trying. He sighed. Bring the journal to the location indicated in the instructions once you have identified the coordinates. Do not contact the media. Trust me, I said, glancing at Malik. If I was planning a press release, my cousin would have live-streamed it by now. Malik saluted sarcastically. The colonel hung up. I looked at the clock, 10:47 a.m. day 1, and I was already in over my head. We dug deeper. Arthur's journal had diagrams of a chessboard on one page, sheet music on the next, and random equations connecting them. Malik pointed to a sketch labeled Budapest Gambit. That's a chess opening, he said. Your grandpa was a strategist. Or just a drama queen, I said. He literally wrote a sonata about hiding money. By afternoon, we had two things, coordinates pointing to a storage facility in Baltimore, and a stomachache from bad coffee and existential dread. Guess we're going to Baltimore, I said. Malik grinned. Road trip with federal implications. Love it. Before we left, I reread one of the journal's lines. When the grandson has nothing left to lose, he will find what I could not claim. I closed the book slowly. He'd known this moment would come, known I'd have to hit rock bottom before I could even look up. Part of me wanted to throw the damn thing out the window. The other part wanted rows of orange doors, chain-link fences, and a smell that could only be described as expired mystery. Unit 219. That was the number in Arthur's notes. I unlocked it, the metal door screeching up like it hadn't been opened since Nixon. Inside was a single filing cabinet, a dusty chessboard mid-game, and a brass key taped under the lid. Dude, Malik whispered. This is straight-up Indiana Jones meets IRS audit. We searched through the cabinet drawers, old ledgers, yellowed papers, account numbers scrawled on stationery with government letterheads. One page stood out, a letterhead from Cross Manufacturing. The letter was addressed to Arthur McRae, chief cryptographer, dated 1964. It mentioned unregistered overseas transfers and delayed restitution. Malik read it aloud. Holy crap. They used your grandpa to cover illegal funding transfers during Reconstruction. The guy was laundering ethics for the Pentagon. Yeah, I said softly. And they buried him for it. We stood there, silent except for the distant buzz of fluorescent lights. Somewhere between the dust and the paper, I realized this wasn't about inheritance anymore. This was legacy, the kind that doesn't sparkle, the kind that stains. Tucked behind the chessboard was a photo. Arthur and a man who looked eerily like Adrian Cross, only older, shaking hands beside a crate labeled Cliniv Supplies. I turned it over. On the back, never trust the quiet ones. That's when my phone buzzed again. Another unknown number. But this one was shorter, local. I answered cautiously. Marcus Hale, a familiar voice purred. So it's true. Bianca, I said flatly. You've reached the part of my life where classified military personnel call me more often than my ex-wife. She ignored the jab. Adrian mentioned your grandfather's name today. Funny coincidence, isn't it? Yeah, I said. Hilarious. Tell him I said hi from beyond the grave. You should be careful, she said. You're stepping into something bigger than you realize. Thanks, Bianca. I'll add unsolicited advice from the woman who ruined my credit score to my safety checklist. She sighed. You always think everything's a joke. No, I said, looking at the stack of government papers. I just think it's funny how the truth always shows up late, but dressed to kill. When the call ended, Malik looked at me. She knows something. They both do, I said. Which means we're officially out of rehearsal. Time for the main act. We spent another hour cataloging the documents before heading back to the car. Malik was practically vibrating with excitement. You realize if we publish this, it's a Pulitzer. Government corruption, corporate collusion. This is the motherlode. I shook my head. Not yet. If Arthur wanted headlines, he'd have written a manifesto. He wanted resolution, closure, maybe redemption. As we pulled out of the lot, I glanced back at the unit, dust swirling like the past exhaling. I could almost hear Arthur's voice, patient and cryptic. Play the next movement, Marcus. The score's not finished. We hit the highway again, 48 hours left on the clock. Malik was already typing notes for his article. I was already wondering what the hell I'd just stepped into. Because somewhere in between the rules, the riddles, and the fine print, I realized something terrifying. The inheritance wasn't just mine to claim. It was mine to defend. Baltimore didn't smell like history or heroism. It smelled like burnt diesel, old coffee, and the kind of bad decisions you can't quite remember making. The sky hung low, gray and sticky, like the universe had forgotten to finish the day. Malik parked our rented Ford Fusion outside the storage facility, looked at the faded 24-hour security sign, and muttered, "If we die here, I want it on record that I told you this was a terrible idea." You didn't tell me that, I said. Yeah, well, I'm telling you now. The place looked like every true crime documentary's establishing shot. Endless rows of orange metal doors, rust creeping up the locks, a flickering light that had definitely seen things. Unit 219 sat in the middle of the third row, waiting like a secret that had been patient for too long. I still had the brass key we'd found taped under Arthur's chessboard sketch, warm in my palm, heavier than it should have been. Malik shoved his hands in his pockets. All right, Mozart. Moment of truth. Don't call me that, I muttered. I slid the key into the lock. It resisted at first, decades of disuse making the mechanism stubborn, then turned with a satisfying click that echoed like a starting gun. The door creaked up slowly, revealing darkness, dust, and a smell that could only be described as government neglect. Inside, a metal filing cabinet, a wooden crate, and, because my life had officially entered symbolism overdrive, a chessboard frozen mid-game on a small table. White to move. Malik whistled low. Man, this is creepy in a haunted logic puzzle kind of way. I stepped inside, flipping on my phone flashlight. The beam caught motes of dust swirling like memories. The chess pieces were positioned in what looked like a deliberate pattern. Pawns advanced aggressively, knights flanking, the white bishop missing entirely. I squinted. Budapest Gambit, I said under my breath. Malik glanced up. What? It's a chess opening. You sacrifice a pawn early to gain position later. Grandpa used to teach it to me when I was a kid. Said it was about strategy, not loss. I stared at the board, the familiar layout triggering something in my memory. He always said, sometimes you give up the obvious to protect the unseen. Malik grinned. Sounds like he was prepping you for marriage. Yeah, well, I said, brushing dust off the filing cabinet. I clearly missed that part of the lesson. The cabinet drawers groaned as I pulled them open, one by one. Inside were meticulously labeled folders. Ledger 1963, Clin of Accounts, Swiss Holdings. Each smelled faintly of cigarette smoke and history. I laid them out on the table, heart hammering. Malik leaned over, eyes scanning the yellowed pages. You seeing what I'm seeing? Cross Manufacturing, I whispered. The name was printed in sharp black ink across several letters, correspondence between Arthur and Adrian Cross's grandfather. The tone was formal, urgent. Malik picked up one letter and read aloud. Funds transferred to account ending 0294 via intermediary firms. Ensure records remain sealed until the completion of Phase 3. He looked at me. Phase 3? That's not a good phase number. No one ever survives Phase 3. I took the letter from him. Look at the signature. Arthur's name is there, but so is Charles Cross. Meaning? Malik asked. Meaning they were in business together. And judging from the tone, not the legal kind. Malik smirked. So your ex-wife's husband's family fortune might have been built on a Cold War money laundering scheme. I love this plot twist for you. Yeah, I said, my voice tight. Real heartwarming. We dug through more documents. Invoices, deposit records, letters written in code, phrases like movement of parts and transfers of harmony. In musician terms, those were weird metaphors. In government terms, they screamed cover up. At the bottom drawer, taped to the underside, was another envelope. Inside, a single sheet of paper with handwritten coordinates and one word, bank. Next to it, a stamped insignia, an eagle clutching a harp. Malik's jaw dropped. That's the emblem from Operation Night Music. I felt a chill crawl up my spine. So this is where it starts to make sense. We followed the coordinates. They pointed to a bank downtown, one of those old-world marble places that probably smelled like inherited guilt. But before we left, I spotted something else. A photograph stuck to the back wall with an old pushpin. Arthur, smiling, younger, in uniform, standing next to a man in a dark suit. The man's face looked familiar. Too familiar. I took a closer look. Oh, you've got to be kidding me. Malik leaned in. Who is that? Adrian Cross Sr. The original Snake. Malik blinked. Your ex-wife's new husband's granddaddy. Dude, that's biblical. I pulled the photo off the wall, flipping it over. On the back, scrawled in Arthur's handwriting, the quiet ones always move first. I exhaled, rubbing my temples. So this whole thing, this entire mess, started generations ago. My grandfather and the Cross family working together. And now, I'm sitting here 50 years later, trying to clean up the encore. Malik looked at me, serious now. You realize if this money trail is real, it could expose half of Washington? Yeah, I said, pocketing the photo. Which means we need to move fast, before someone realizes we're two idiots who just cracked open Pandora's filing cabinet. We packed up the key documents and locked the unit behind us. As we reached the car, Malik checked his phone. We should call the colonel, right? Tell him what we found. I shook my head. Not yet. The man works for the Pentagon. His poker face has a clearance level. So what's the plan? I looked at the sheet with the coordinates again. We go to the bank. See what Grandpa left behind. Baltimore's traffic was its own form of psychological warfare, but we made it to the address in about 40 minutes. The building loomed over the street like it had opinions about everyone who walked past. Inside, the marble floors echoed with the kind of silence that made you whisper even when you didn't need to. We approached the reception desk. The banker, a silver-haired woman with a smile so polished it should have been insured, looked up. Good afternoon. How may I assist you? I placed the brass key on the counter. I believe I have a safety deposit box. It belonged to Arthur McCrae. Her expression didn't change, but something behind her eyes flickered. One moment, sir. She disappeared through a door. Malik and I exchanged a look. Either she's confirming your identity, Malik whispered, or she's calling the FBI. When she returned, she carried a clipboard. I'll need to verify your signature and identification, Mr. Hale. After enough paperwork to adopt a small country, she led us into a narrow hallway lined with metal boxes. She stopped at one, slot 47B, and inserted the key. The lock clicked open like it had been waiting decades just to exhale. Inside the box, a sealed envelope, an old reel-to-reel tape, and a single sheet of manuscript paper with music written across it. Arthur's handwriting again. The piece was titled Redemption Suite. Malik leaned over. What's that? Something he never performed publicly, I said. He said it wasn't finished. On the back of the sheet were numbers, sequences that looked like bank accounts, routing codes, international transfers. At the bottom, scrawled in fading ink, play this, and the truth will answer. I turned to Malik. I think he literally encoded account numbers into a melody. He grinned. Your grandpa was a genius and a criminal. I held the paper carefully. He was a musician who outsmarted thieves. There's a difference. We took the box's contents and signed the logbook. On our way out, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched. Maybe it was the security cameras. Maybe it was paranoia. Either way, I tightened my grip on the envelope. Outside, the city looked different. Sharper. Meaner. I opened the envelope as Malik started the car. Inside was a ledger labeled Cliniv Holdings and a note. If you're reading this, Marcus, they've already noticed. I froze. Oh, that's comforting. Malik glanced over. Who's they? Before I could answer, My phone buzzed again. Unknown number. I answered cautiously. Yeah. Mr. Hale, said a voice I didn't recognize. You've opened the unit. I hope you found it enlightening. Who is this? Let's just say we have mutual family interests. Walk away from this, and you'll live comfortably. Keep digging, and you won't live long enough to care. Click. I stared at the phone screen, heart pounding. Malik frowned. Please tell me that was a telemarketer. Worse, I said. That was someone who knows exactly what we found. The car went silent except for the low hum of the engine. The envelope sat between us like a live grenade. Malik broke the silence first. So what now? I looked at the paper in my lap. Arthur's melody, the one he said would make the truth answer. Now, I said, we do what he wanted. And what's that? I smirked, though my stomach twisted. We play the damn song. If you ever want to test how much chaos a single sheet of music can cause, try holding one that may be worth $156 million while sitting in a Baltimore parking lot. Malik was behind the wheel, tapping the steering wheel with nervous rhythm, while I stared at Arthur's Redemption Suite, as if it might suddenly sprout subtitles explaining my life. The handwriting was neat, deliberate. My grandfather had always written like a man trying to hide genius inside geometry. Between the bars of notes were slashes of numbers, subtle patterns that I couldn't unsee now. This is it, I murmured. The whole thing, the melody, the math, the message. Malik peered over. You're saying your grandfather basically turned a bank code into a song? That's wild. Not wild, I said, strategic. He knew the only person who could read this properly would be someone who thinks in sound, not numbers. Malik grinned. So basically you. I sighed. Yeah, lucky me. We checked into a cheap hotel off Pratt Street, the kind of place where the carpet had opinions and the front desk clerk looked like he'd lost a bet with destiny. The clerk slid us our key cards with the enthusiasm of a man handing out death sentences. Room 212, 2 beds, 1 flickering light, and a view of the dumpster. Perfect for decoding a generational conspiracy. I set up my violin case on the table, the instrument gleaming faintly under the weak light. I pulled out Arthur's sheet and began to play, slow at first, then faster, feeling the rhythm of the notes guide me towards something more than sound. It wasn't just music, it was a pattern, a message hidden in melody. Malik was pacing behind me, scribbling numbers on notepads, connecting tempo markings to digits. After a few minutes, he stopped, eyes wide. Marcus, look. I lowered the bow. What am I looking at? He pointed to his notes. Those repeating measures, they matched the Swiss bank code format. In this set, he circled another group of numbers. That's definitely a routing pattern. Dude, your grandfather hid literal account numbers inside Beethoven-level drama. I sat down, trying to breathe. So it's real. It's very real, he said. And if these accounts still exist, that's a lot of zeros, my guy. I laughed, a hollow sound. Yeah, and every one of those zeros comes with moral debt. He frowned. What do you mean? Arthur's money wasn't his, I said quietly. If cross-manufacturing was involved, then this was blood money, war profits, stolen contracts, maybe worse. If I just take it, I'm no better than them. Malik dropped into the chair across from me. Bro, don't start getting philosophical. You were married to a woman who tried to gaslight you into bankruptcy. You deserve something good coming your way. Yeah, I said, staring at the violin. But not like this. He leaned back, arms crossed. So what's the play then? Return it? To who? The Pentagon? The same people who buried this for 60 years. I rubbed my face. I don't know yet. But I know this. Arthur didn't hide it for me to get rich. He hid it for me to fix something. Before Malik could reply, my phone rang. Unknown number again. My blood pressure shot up like a rocket. I answered slowly. If this is another mystery voice threatening me, I'd like to file a complaint. Mr. Hale, came Colonel Price's familiar voice, calm as ever. I trust you found the storage unit. I swallowed. Yeah, found it. And the bank box. And now I've got a piece of music that apparently doubles as a vault password. Good, he said. You're ahead of schedule. Not sure I like the sound of that, I said. What exactly am I supposed to do with this information? He paused, which meant the answer was complicated. The funds connected to your grandfather's discovery were transferred through multiple shell accounts. The government wants to recover them discreetly. However, we believe certain parties connected to cross-manufacturing are attempting to interfere. You may be in possession of evidence that could destroy their current holdings. I stood up, pacing. Destroy? You mean expose them? Among other things, he said. But you need to understand. These people have resources. Walk carefully. Colonel, I said. These people also have my ex-wife on speed dial. Careful isn't really an option anymore. He didn't laugh. Then you'd best finish this quickly. Click. The call ended. I looked at Malik. They know everything. He nodded. Yeah, and that's exactly why we should publish this. Blow it wide open before they bury you too. No, I said. If we go public too early, they'll spin it. I need proof. All of it. Then I'll decide how to play. Malik leaned forward, smirking. So, what? You're gonna play your way to justice. Maybe, I said. Arthur hid his confession in a symphony. I'll do the same. That's how the idea started. Reckless, maybe stupid, definitely poetic. I'd performed the redemption suite publicly, encoded notes and all, each measure exposing another layer of the truth. But first, I needed to confirm everything. We spent the next day tracking the accounts hidden in the melody. Malik had a friend in financial forensics, a woman named Kendra who owed him a favor after he'd covered a corruption scandal for her firm. We met her in a diner that smelled like bacon grease and bad secrets. Kendra was all sharp edges and sarcasm. Malik told me you've got a musical treasure map, she said, sliding into the booth. Something like that, I said, showing her the notations. She squinted. You weren't kidding. This is genius-level encryption. Each key change hides numerical sequences, and the rest's mark transaction dates. Whoever did this had clearance-level creativity. That's one way to describe my grandfather, I said. She spent 2 hours analyzing the data. When she finally looked up, her face was pale. These accounts are active. I blinked. Active. She nodded. Swiss holdings, offshore trusts, still open, still funded. We're talking 87 million, give or take. Malik whistled. Arthur McRae, you beautiful bastard. I leaned back, dizzy. And the rest? She hesitated. If I'm reading this right, the other portion, about 69 million, is held under a Department of Defense restitution clause. Accessible only under his name or direct descendant. That's you. So I'm holding keys to $156 million of hidden history, I said. And the Pentagon wants it back. She nodded. Pretty much. Malik grinned. Man, you could buy your house back. Hell, buy the whole block. Or, I said, I could buy some integrity. That earned an eye roll. You're insufferable, he muttered. We thanked Kendra and headed back to the car. My brain was running faster than my heart could handle. By the time we got to the hotel, dusk had swallowed the city. I sat by the window, staring at the skyline flickering with office lights. People going about their normal evenings, blissfully unaware that one violinist was sitting on a Cold War fortune and a moral dilemma big enough to sink a country. Malik tossed me a beer. So what now, Marcus? You gonna turn yourself into a nonprofit? Something like that, I said. Arthur wanted redemption, not revenge. He groaned. Man, your brand of morality is exhausting. Before I could reply, my phone buzzed again. This time, not an unknown number. Adrian Cross. I froze. Speak of the devil. Malik sat up. Answer it. Put it on speaker. I hesitated, then picked up. Adrian. Marcus, he said smoothly, his voice dripping with smug wealth. I think we need to talk. Do we, though? I feel like your family's already said plenty in 1964. He chuckled. You've been busy, digging into things that don't concern you. Everything concerns me when my grandfather's name is attached to your dirty inheritance. His tone darkened. Listen carefully. Take the money quietly, disappear, and live comfortably. Or you make noise, and I make sure you lose everything, again. Tempting, I said, but I've already lost everything. What are you gonna do? Repossess my self-respect? Silence. Then, you're playing a dangerous game, Marcus. Good, I said. I always like the challenging score. Click. He hung up. Malik exhaled. That guy's straight out of a Bond movie. Yeah, I said, pocketing my phone. And I'm done playing his background music. I looked at the sheet again, Redemption Suite. The notes shimmered faintly under the lamp. I could almost hear Arthur whispering, play it loud enough, and the truth can't hide. That night, I didn't sleep. I stayed up transcribing every measure, every encoded sequence, every fragment of meaning. By sunrise, I had what I needed, not just a melody, but a weapon. The plan was simple. Perform the piece publicly at Symphony Hall, broadcast it live. Every phrase would reveal a pattern. Every crescendo would echo with numbers the world couldn't ignore. Malik would leak the findings to the press simultaneously. When I finally collapsed into bed, exhausted but wired, Malik muttered from across the room, "You know this could ruin you, right?" I smiled into the pillow. "Or redeem me." He grunted, "Man, you and your poetic justice." But as I drifted into half-sleep, I thought of Arthur, the soldier turned musician turned ghost with unfinished business. And for the first time, I understood him. Music wasn't just beauty. It was proof. And I was about to make the world listen. There's something uniquely terrifying about pressing send on an email that could ruin powerful people before breakfast. Malik called it journalism. I called it career suicide with extra flair. But once the plan was set in motion, there was no rewinding the tape. My grandfather's redemption suite wasn't just music anymore. It was a confession dressed in melody, a math problem disguised as beauty. The whole thing was about to go public, and all I had to do was play it like it wasn't about to set the city on fire. The morning of the concert started wrong. I woke up to 36 missed calls, half from unknown numbers, and the other half from journalists who'd somehow already sniffed the story. Malik was pacing in the kitchen of my condo like an underpaid campaign manager. He had his phone glued to his ear, speaking fast. "Yes, the story's verified. Yes, it's real. No, we can't give you the account numbers, because we like not being assassinated. Publish at noon." I said noon, not whenever your editor's coffee hits. I stepped out, tie loose, violin case in hand. "Tell me again why we didn't just leak this anonymously?" He smirked. "Because you like drama, and I like Pulitzers." He wasn't wrong. By noon, the Baltimore Ledger had gone live with the headline, "Helicopters, Heartbreak, and Hidden Accounts. The Cross Legacy Exposed." The story blew through the internet like gasoline on open flame. Within hours, hashtags were trending. Hashtag Cross Exposed. Hashtag Redemption Suite. Hashtag Violin Leaks. Everyone loves a scandal that comes with a soundtrack. That was Malik's genius. He'd embedded a preview of the piece online, a 30-second teaser of me playing Arthur's melody. It was haunting, simple, and unsettling in that way truth often is. The comments section went nuclear. "This sounds like betrayal," one person wrote. "Feels like history unraveling," said another. My personal favorite was, "Someone tell Netflix to call this man." By 2 o'clock, my phone rang. It was Colonel Price. His voice carried that particular blend of disapproval and reluctant respect. "Mr. Hale, you've created quite the storm." "I just followed orders," I said deadpan. "They were just written in treble clef." "This isn't a joke," he snapped. "The department is under pressure to respond. Cross Manufacturing's legal team is threatening counteraction." "They can threaten all they want," I said. "The truth's already out. You can't put a lid on a symphony once the orchestra starts playing." He exhaled sharply. "You've endangered yourself, Marcus. These are not people who forgive embarrassment." "Yeah, well," I said, tightening my tie. "Luckily, I don't play for their applause anymore." He didn't respond, just hung up. Malik looked up from his laptop, reading the expression on my face. "Government's mad? They've been mad since the Boston Tea Party. I'll live." He grinned. "Maybe. Depends on how tonight goes." Because that night wasn't just any concert. It was the premiere of Redemption Suite, a sold-out performance at Symphony Hall that had gone from niche event to national broadcast in less than 6 hours. Reporters were already camped outside, hungry for quotes, footage, and, if the rumors were true, potential arrests. When I arrived backstage, the air buzzed with tension. The other musicians avoided eye contact, whispering in corners. The conductor, an old friend named Naomi, pulled me aside. "Marcus," she said softly, "is it true? About the banks, the crosses, the inheritance?" "Every note of it," I said. She blinked, pale. "Do you realize they could shut this down?" "They'd have to drag me off the stage," I said. "And I'll still play from the parking lot if I have to." Naomi sighed, shaking her head. "You're impossible." "Thanks. It's a family trait." The curtain call came fast. Lights dimmed, the crowd hushed, and I walked on stage to an audience that wasn't just here for music. They were here for a reckoning. You could feel it. The air itself had questions. I nodded to Naomi, who raised her baton, and for a few seconds, everything went silent. Then I began to play. The first notes drifted softly, sweet and melancholy, like the sound of an apology too late. The hall was still. Even the air seemed to hold its breath. The melody climbed, weaved, and fell, every note weighted with history. But hidden beneath it all, the syncopation, the pauses, the deliberate phrasing, was the data, the confession, the proof. When I reached the crescendo, I thought of Arthur, alone in some smoky room decades ago, scribbling this exact passage, knowing one day someone like me would have to finish the movement. My fingers trembled, but I played through it, every stroke of the bow a declaration. I glanced up once, halfway through the second movement, and spotted them. Two men in suits near the back, earpieces glinting under the light. Government or corporate muscle, didn't matter. They were watching. Good. Let them listen. By the time the final note faded, the hall was silent, the kind of silence that feels like it's staring back at you. Then the applause came, not thunderous but rising like a wave, unsure at first, then crashing forward until it filled every corner. I bowed once, expression calm, even though my heart was sprinting. Backstage, Naomi grabbed my arm. "You just started a war," she whispered. "I prefer to think of it as an encore," I said. Malik was waiting near the exit, laptop in hand. "The story's global," he said breathlessly. "The New York Times, Reuters, even the BBC picked it up. They're calling it the Redemption Files. Adrian Cross is trending for all the wrong reasons." "Good," I said. "He deserves the spotlight for once." Then came the inevitable. Reporters swarmed the stage door like locusts. Microphones, flashes, shouted questions. "Mr. Hale, did you know the money was stolen? Is it true your ex-wife's husband is implicated? Do you plan to return the inheritance?" I smiled politely, leaned toward the nearest microphone, and said, "My grandfather taught me that music tells the truth when people won't. Tonight, you all heard the truth." Then I walked away. By midnight, Cross Manufacturing stock had dropped 30%. News anchors were calling it the most melodic financial scandal in American history. Adrian, predictably, released a statement blaming misunderstandings of historical context. Bianca posted a photo of herself on Instagram with the caption, "Healing energy only." The comments section did not share that sentiment. But the biggest shock came 2 days later. The Pentagon released an official statement confirming irregularities in Cold War contracts involving private contractors, including the Cross Corporation. It was the kind of statement that sounds calm but feels like an earthquake. Government suits were suddenly testifying. Auditors were combing through decades of financial rot, and the name McRae was no longer whispered. It was honored. Malik's paper won national attention overnight. He got interviews, awards, death threats, and, weirdly, a fan club. He took it all in stride. "You realize we're folk heroes now," he said one morning, scrolling through headlines. "Speak for yourself," I said, tuning my violin. "I'm still a man who owes rent and accidentally exposed a corporate crime ring." He grinned. Minor details. The weeks that followed were a blur of noise, court hearings, press requests, legal letters. I turned down every interview, every exclusive. I didn't want fame. I wanted peace. But peace doesn't come easy when you've just detonated a multi-million-dollar cover-up. One evening, I got a call from Colonel Price again. His tone was softer this time. "Mr. Hale," he said, "the department recognizes your contribution. While we can't publicly commend you, you should know this. You helped close a chapter we thought was lost." I smiled faintly. "Tell that to the Cross family. They'll be fine," he said. "Prison isn't fatal for the wealthy, just inconvenient." I laughed quietly. Good to know justice has a premium plan. When the call ended, I stood by the window, looking out over the city. The world hadn't changed much. People still hurried. Traffic still buzzed. Life moved on. But something inside me had shifted. For the first time since Bianca's betrayal, since Arthur's mystery, I felt right. Not rich, not powerful, just right. The next morning, Malik burst into my apartment waving a newspaper. "Dude, you've got to see this. They're turning the Redemption Suite performance into a documentary. Titles already decided. The violinist who exposed the Pentagon." I laughed until I couldn't breathe. "That's ridiculous." "Yeah," he said, grinning. "But admit it, it's catchy." I leaned back, sipping my coffee. "I don't care what they call it. I just hope it makes people listen." He nodded slowly. "You think Arthur would be proud?" I looked down at the violin resting in its case. The same one I'd used to decode his music, the same one that turned his silence into sound. I think he'd finally be at peace, I said. And maybe that's enough. Later that day, I walked to Symphony Hall, empty now except for the faint echo of the past. I stood on the same stage where I'd played the truth into existence. The lights were off, the chairs stacked, but I could still feel the energy humming through the walls. I took out my violin and played one note. Just one. It rang clear and pure, lingering longer than it should have, like Arthur's ghost nodding in approval. For the first time in months, I smiled. The music had done what words couldn't. It had cut through lies, crossed decades, and rewritten history with a bow and a melody. And I realized something simple, something true. Sometimes redemption isn't about winning. It's about finally ending the song. The night of the Redemption Suite premiere felt like standing on the edge of two lifetimes. The hall was packed, journalists, veterans, students, skeptics, all drawn by the scandal-turned symphony. I walked on stage in a black suit that suddenly felt heavier than armor. When the spotlight hit, I didn't see faces. I saw Arthur's handwriting, his ghost in every measure, daring me to finish what he'd started. The first note broke the silence like confession. The music poured out, grief, guilt, pride, every emotion coded into melody. During the slow movement, I embedded the names of soldiers Arthur once mourned, letting their stories breathe between the strings. By the final crescendo, I wasn't playing anymore. I was releasing. When it ended, the audience rose as one, not for me, but for the truth. Cameras flashed, tears glistened, and I bowed, not as a performer, but as a messenger. The foundation I'd created, the Arthur McRae Fund for Families, would turn that stolen money into something human again. The applause thundered, but I just smiled at the ceiling and whispered, "You can rest now, Grandpa." The song's finally finished. 6 months later, the noise faded. No more headlines, no threats, no flashing cameras, just quiet mornings and a secondhand piano in my new 2-bedroom condo. I taught free lessons to kids who thought music was magic and to veterans who remembered it as mercy. The world had moved on, but I hadn't. I didn't want to. Sometimes, in the stillness, I caught myself playing Arthur's Redemption Suite again. Softer now, slower, like a prayer instead of a protest. The foundation thrived. Families got homes, therapy, dignity. The money that once carried guilt now paid for healing. Bianca remarried someone safe. Adrian went to prison, where his suits couldn't save him. As for me, I found peace in small moments. A student's first flawless note, a veteran's trembling smile, the echo of something pure. People asked if I regretted it all, the exposure, the chaos, the sleepless nights. I'd just smile and say, I regret nothing that told the truth. Arthur taught me that silence can be a plan, not surrender. And when I closed my eyes and let the final chord linger, I realized the music had stopped, but the harmony finally remained.